Good morning, it is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The Justice Secretary plans a major overhaul of the Crown Courts, hoping to clear the backlog and hand more support to victims.
The budget fallout continues. Trust in government is lower than during the Liz Truss era, according to new polling.
The boss of NHS England calls the new resident doctors' strike planned in the run-up to Christmas totally reckless behaviour.
Also today, how safe do women feel on the streets? From runners to buskers, we'll be hearing your experiences ahead of a major report into safety out later today.
And Sky News joins Spanish police on a mission to intercept drug runners on a notorious route from Africa.
A very good morning to you. Well, the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, will announce major reforms to the criminal justice system today, scrapping juries in thousands of less serious cases, but stopping short of a more radical potential plan to drop jury trials after backlash from the legal profession last week.
So the changes are aimed at clearing the backlog of cases, and the Deputy Prime Minister has warned of what he calls an emergency, with almost 80,000 cases still to be heard in the Crown Court, which of course leaves victims waiting years to see justice.
In about 15 minutes, David Lammy is going to join us live, and we'll get the full details of what is going to change in the justice system. But first, let's hear what he had to say overnight.
Everything I'm announcing today is about centering victims in our criminal justice system. It is unacceptable that if you are raped in our country tonight, that you might be waiting until 2028, 2029 for a hearing. There is no silver bullet to fix this problem. We have to do all of it. We have to throw everything at it if we're going to bring this backlog down. That is not solely about money and finance, although we must increase that, and we are increasing that more than ever before. But it's also about reform to how our criminal justice system works, and of course it's about modernisation.
Well, Mari's here. Mari, I'm really confused, I'll be honest, because last week we had that leaked memo, which was leaked to multiple outlets, and it was also a memo that went around all the government departments, so it felt pretty like a thing, saying that nearly all jury trials would be scrapped. And yet in the kind of overnight briefing, we heard Lammy there, he's not talking about that.
Exactly. It feels like a bit of a mess. So you're absolutely right to say that that's what ministers were told last week. Last week they were told it was going to be rape, murder and manslaughter and public interest, and everything else was not going to be able to have trial by jury. Now we wake up this morning and there's been a very, very heavy briefing in the Times that it's only actually going to be limiting jury trials of either way offences. So for people who might not know this kind of legal jargon, let me explain. Either way offences are things like ABH, actual bodily harm, theft, drug offences, burglary. So those will lose the right to have a jury trial. But things like GBH with intent, robbery, and also murder, rape and manslaughter will remain. So essentially it's a wider spectrum of cases that will be allowed to be tried by jury than what ministers were briefed literally a week ago, which is why it's so bizarre. It gives the impression that perhaps there was a bit of a backlash, and David Lammy has decided that politically this is uncomfortable, but it is nowhere near as drastic as what we were briefed last week.
But I think it's fair to say so much of the backlash over the last week is kind of based on the principle of all of this, not necessarily, oh, if they draw the line here, it's OK, whereas if it was there, it's not OK. I think it's the fact that you're drawing the line at all and having to solve a problem, which is a massive problem that built up significantly under the last government, by breaking a sort of fundamental principle of the justice system that many people still firmly believe in.
And I think the difficulty for David Lammy is he's a lawyer. And so he has been on the record talking about how fundamental jury trials are to British life and British justice, which was why it was so easy for the opposition parties to use that as a stick to beat him with and argue that, hold on a second, not too long ago you were the one advocating for this and now you're going to be the guy who's going to scrap it, which is why, presumably, this is perhaps factored into the decision-making. Let me just give you the reaction from the Law Society. The Law Society have said additional funding for victims is welcome, but it only papers over the cracks and doesn't address the fundamental problems. What victims and witnesses want is swift and fair justice. For this, the government needs to address courtrooms in despair, chronic shortages of judges, court staff and defence lawyers, overcrowded prisons and overstretched probation services. So essentially what the Law Society is saying, even if there are some changes that we still don't know for sure what's happening because they seem to be changing their minds every 5 minutes, actually there is a much wider issue in the justice system and it's going to take far more than just this one tweak to really help victims see justice quickly.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to try and find out, I think, from David Lammy when we speak to him in about 10 minutes. Mari, thank you very much.
Do you know what? I'm really looking forward to that as well because he's had a very tough in-tray to deal with since moving across to justice, and let's see how he performs. I've always thought he's quite a good performer. He actually sort of listens and answers the questions, but I think these are going to be the toughest questions he's had since being in government, basically, and be really fascinating to watch. Coming up in, 10 minutes' time. Now, we've had nearly a week. Gosh, has it been nearly a week to get to grips? It's not been a week, though, really.
Very nearly.
6 days. So nearly a week does work, to be fair. 6 days. Anyway, to get to grips with the budget and what it means for your finances. So it's a good time to try and work out how it's all gone down with the public.
So we've got a new poll. It's by YouGov and Sky, and it shows that when it comes to the economy, people's trust in the government is actually lower than it was when Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
Quite a striking headline, that. There's lots of sub-details as well. Sam Coates has them for us.
The budget fallout continues. The question everyone's been asking of Rachel Reeves, can you trust me? Well, now we've got the answer with the help of YouGov. And here's the question we've been asking for the last couple of days. Did the Chancellor exaggerate the bad economic news in order to put up taxes? Here's the public verdict. 37% thought she presented an overly negative view of the economy in the run-up to the budget. That's almost twice the percentage that thought she was broadly honest. 13% thought she was overly positive. We always exclude the don't knows, but that's not the backdrop to the budget that she would want to see. So let's look at the individual tax and spend measures last week and how they have gone down now the dust has settled a little bit. Now, the green is people who agree with measures. The red is those who don't. And you can see from the main spending measures, actually the public pretty much like them. Fuel duty freeze, business rate cuts, energy bill cuts. But arguably the totemic measure in the budget is this one, the two-child benefit cap. 58% don't like it. Now let's look at the tax measures, and some, like gambling tax, well, that's pretty popular. But the massive measures in the budget are really quite unpopular. Freezing income tax threshold, the electric vehicle tax, and changes to pensions for people in work. You can see all that red there, not happy at all. So where has this left Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and its economic reputation? Well, you can see here, this red line is people that think that Labour are the best placed party to manage the economy. And you can see after Keir Starmer became Labour, broadly speaking, did a good job. It became the top party. It overtook the Conservatives in late 2022. But here's the thing. Look at this line here. That's when Labour was elected. And look at the sharp drop almost immediately. And here, this is the latest data point. Let me just come around. It's actually dropped lower here than at any point since either Jeremy Corbyn was leader or lower than the Tories had when Liz Truss did her mini budget. Again, fairly disastrous here on 10%. Now, let's look at some other budget measures. Here we go. This is the proportion of people that think this budget will make the country better off. That's just 8%. 29%, not much difference, but a whopping 52% think that this budget will make the country worse off. And then there's the question of trust. Do people think it breaches the manifesto? 57% think that it does, compared to just 13% that it doesn't. None of these results from YouGov are the kind of things that Rachel Reeves wants to see as she's trying to reset the public finance and restore the public's trust in her as Chancellor.
Wow, 10% trust the government. I mean, that is a terrible statistic for the government to wake up to. Sam Coates there with more analysis, by the way, on politics at Sam and Anne's as well on that. Also, just wanted to bring you this other story that broke quite late yesterday, which is that the boss of the OBR, that's the Office for Budget Responsibility, the organisation that's worked very closely with Rachel Reeves to prepare the budget, Richard Hughes, resigned late yesterday. And this comes back, Sophie, to that story on Budget Day where they leaked accidentally their report a few hours before it should have done, so it preempted Rachel Reeves' speech.
Yeah, it was a massive, massive moment when the OBR accidentally published what was effectively the budget, really. Everyone could see the budget hours before Rachel Reeves stood up and delivered it, which is obviously very market sensitive. It also massively impacted the Chancellor too, because normally with the budget, we hear the government's framing of the budget first. This time we got the analysis first, so it really knocked off a few.
Just a few knock-on effects. So he was meant to appear in front of the Treasury Select Committee today. He now won't. Some people think that's a bit of a short-term reprieve for the government. That said, he's now on the outside. Maybe he'll give a tell-all interview, in a way that he won't be as restrained. So I think that remains to be seen, the consequences of that. Obviously, the Tories are saying the Chancellor's forcing somebody else to take the blame. But this comes back to that specific issue that we said. And I just want to read this one line, because the OBR's own internal report, the organisation he was the head of, said it was the worst failure in the organisation's history. We could go into the details of it, but that is why he has felt necessary to resign. You could argue in a kind of noble way. He cares a lot about this organisation. It was the worst failure in the organisation's history. He's trying to draw a line under it, as opposed to, there's a lot of politics to the budget, as that poll shows. This, I think, is someone taking responsibility for his own organisation making a mistake.
Now, resident doctors in England are set to go on strike again. The British Medical Association has announced a 5-day walkout starting on the 17th of December.
Well, the boss of NHS England's described the move as totally reckless behaviour. Let's bring in our correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Miocic. Oliver, so just bring us up to speed on where we are with these strikes from the resident doctors. It's not the first, obviously, in recent times.
It's definitely not the first. This is the 14th round of strikes since 2023. So for some people, they'll feel like they've seen doctors on picket lines repeatedly over the past few years, and indeed they have. The BMA says this latest round of strikes is because around a third of what were previously called junior doctors, now called resident doctors, haven't got any substantive employment because there is a jobs crisis for those entry-level jobs. And it says that the government hasn't come back with a compelling pay offer. Now, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has hit back saying, over the past 3 years, the government has increased pay for junior doctors, resident doctors as they're now called, by 28.9%. The government was willing to put extra jobs on the table in this latest round of negotiations, but that the BMA just threw that outright, did not take it to their membership. The Health Secretary saying that the BMA is trying a cynical ploy here to wreck Christmas.
Yeah, doesn't sound like they're about to reach an agreement anytime soon, does it? Can I just ask about the timing of this? Because, look, I know that when these strikes are announced, a lot of people feel, a bit of anxiety around that as well. And it's just before Christmas, so I guess it's cold, got lots of NHS winter bugs, and also a lot of people going out as well, right?
Yeah, we do. And the sort of data that we're getting from Australia, which of course gets its winter flu season before we do, is that Australia's had its sort of one in a decade flu season. Really, really bad, real strain on the health services there. We're already seeing reports from the likes of the London Ambulance Service saying that in the past week, they've had their worst 3 days of the year consecutively, with a 20% increase in the number of call-outs for people who've got respiratory problems because of things like the flu. So already there are some early markers that this could be a tough winter, and we've heard from the director of NHS providers. Now, this is the membership organisation for hospital trusts and for ambulance services. Daniel Erkler says, everyone knows in the run-up to Christmas, we need all hands on deck. It's really important to be able to discharge as many patients as possible so that where appropriate, they can be at home with their loved ones. He then goes on to say, we need to ensure that there's hospital capacity too to deal with the additional demand that always comes at this time of year. That's going to be even more challenging now.
We're going to be speaking to the BMA later on in the programme. The Deputy Chair of the BMA's Resident Doctors Committee, that'll be up later. For now, Oliver, thanks so much.
Or should I say, that interview, of course, coming up with Wilf, definitely want to watch. And also let us know what you think about the planned strike. I'm interested to, get some perspectives on this, actually, because I'm sure there'll be some people who think that actually, the pay is really important, the NHS is a very difficult place to work. Others will be thinking, actually, this isn't fair at all. If you've got any questions as well, for the union organising it, let us know, mornings@sky.uk, or, of course, you can find us on social media too.
Now, the US Special Envoy on Peace, Steve Witkoff, is expected to arrive in Moscow this morning to meet with Russia's president. It comes as the Kremlin claims that it's captured another city in the Donetsk region of Ukraine.
So at the same time, President Zelensky appears to be a bit more optimistic about Donald Trump's peace plan. He's going to be meeting with Irish leaders in Dublin today as well. Let's bring in our Moscow correspondent, shall we, Ivor Bennett. What are we expecting then from this Witkoff visit?
Yeah, hi, Sophie. Hi, Wilf. So it is the latest leg of America's shuttle diplomacy, and it'll be Steve Witkoff's sixth visit to Moscow, in fact, to meet with Vladimir Putin since January, since Trump returned to office. And this time he's going to have reinforcements. He'll be joined by Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, who's joined the kind of efforts to get things over the line and try to close a peace deal. Worth just recapping how we got here. It's nearly 2 weeks since a peace deal first emerged, a 28-point plan that was supposedly drawn up after secret talks between Russia and the US, a team led by Steve Witkoff. And it was a plan that Europe and Ukraine felt heavily favoured Russia, that kind of gave in to all of their core demands and crossed all of Ukraine's red lines. So they then put together a counter-proposal to try and get things watered down back in their favour. And after 2 sets of talks between the Americans and the Ukrainians, first in Geneva, then in Florida at the weekend, the Americans say they've got this an updated and refined framework for a peace deal. Donald Trump says he's optimistic that they can now reach a deal finally after nearly 4 years of war. But it's now over to Russia, and I think the question remains, is Russia going to agree to anything less than its maximalist demands? And the signs so far are no. All the noises coming from Moscow in the past few days and weeks are that all of their core demands remain, with Vladimir Putin saying at the end of last week, for example, that the only way fighting will stop is if Ukrainian forces withdraw from the territory in the Donbass, showing that they still want all of that to be Russian, despite them failing to occupy the entirety of it still.
Ivor, just quickly, that city that the Russians claim to have taken, where is it? Do the Ukrainians acknowledge that or not?
Yeah, so they claim, well, it was late last night that the Kremlin announced this. They claim they've now seized the 2 towns of Pokrovsk and Vovchansk in the Donetsk region. And these are 2 key towns they've been laying siege to for quite some time. Ukraine has not acknowledged this at all. They haven't confirmed it. But if it's true, then this would be a big gain for Russia. The Kremlin published footage, of Russian forces flying a flag in what they claim is the square of Pokrovsk. Also, footage was released of Vladimir Putin visiting a command post, meeting his top generals. He says that this apparent gain will allow them to gain more territory on the battlefield. And this feels like a targeted message to the Americans coming on the eve of their visit here, designed, I think, to say that, look, we have the superiority on the battlefield and therefore we should be calling the shots in the negotiations. And I think that really reinforces this idea that they are in no mood to compromise on their core demands. So I'm very sceptical that Steve Witkoff is going to be flying off from here today with Russia's agreement to a peace deal.
OK, Ivor, thank you very much indeed. Right, let's talk the justice system, shall we? We all know about the kind of crippling backlog that we're seeing in the courts. Successive people are trying to grapple with that, to try and bring it down. What is the government planning to do about it? So we're now joined by the Justice Secretary and also the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, I'm pleased to say. Great to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
So what is going on with jury trials? Because we obviously had that memo last week that said that they were going to be scrapped in all but the most serious cases. What's happening?
Well, you're right to start with the backlog. If a woman is sadly raped in our country today, she will likely have her trial come on in 2028, maybe 2029. That's a long time for her to wait. victims of rape are pulling out, 60% are pulling out of cases, witnesses fall away, and the trauma of waiting is too hard. We asked Sir Brian Leveson to look at this issue and do a review, and he looked in depth at what we should do. He said there's no magic bullet. We need reform of the system and made some recommendations. We need investment, of course, in our courts, and we are doing that and increasing the amount of days our courts are sitting, and we need modernisation. On juries specifically, it's important to remember that 90% of all cases are dealt with by our magistrates. They can only sentence to a year, so the question is, can they do a bit more? And I'll be saying something about that later. And also there's a group of cases, they're called triable either way cases. They're cases where you could be sentenced up to generally 5 years in prison. And can some of those cases either be dealt with by magistrates, or can they be dealt with in a new division within the Crown Court? That's what I'm looking at.
I am still quite unclear, if I'm not honest with you. So the either way thing, I think that is clear, right? You're looking at the minute where people have an option to either be tried in a Crown Court by a jury or a magistrate. That, for many of these cases, probably will be just, sped up, so it's not a jury trial. The memo that was sent around to ministers, right? So this is a thing. It's not like a journalist concoction. Was about all cases other than rape, manslaughter, and murder going to a judge. That's not happening anymore. Is that right?
I'll be making my announcement later on. Let's just fix on this. 10% of those cases come to the Crown Court. 7% of them fall away because people plead guilty. That then leaves 3%. The question in front of us today is, if you steal an iPhone from Curry's later on today...
I won't do that, by the way.
Should you be able to opt for a jury trial? Or should that be dealt with by a...
That's an either way case. So that's the either way case. I'm asking about the other cases. The either way is clear, right? That's going to not
where
jury.
Where should the threshold be? Brian says it should be at 3 years. He effectively says 3 years, I think, should be dealt with either by the magistrates or by a new division. And that's what I'm looking at.
You've changed your mind on this. You have
Sophie.
changed your mind on this in the last week, right? Let's be straight. You've changed your mind on this. Why have you changed your mind?
You're asking a process question.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you.
No,
this is not a no. Just to say, this is not a process question. This is about the right to a trial by jury. There is nothing process about this. This is about fundamental beliefs. You, I put it to you, the Justice Secretary, have changed your mind in the last week on whether that should be done in the vast, vast majority of cases. Why have you changed your mind? You might have a really good reason, but why have you changed your mind?
It's a process question to the extent that there was a leak.
I'm asking you and your beliefs, though.
Yeah, but I haven't. I'm going to be making a statement to Parliament later and setting out my view. There is a process by which you discuss with Cabinet colleagues what you might be looking at, they feed back, you make a judgment. And
so
it's
was
on
it
that
cabinet?
basis...
Was it the Cabinet reaction then?
Of course you discuss these things with Cabinet colleagues. It's on that basis that you reach a judgment.
And they didn't like it
And I'll be
very much.
laying out that judgment later on. The point is, I don't want a backlog. I don't want victims suffering, but I also believe fundamentally in the jury system. And I thank the 300,000 or so people every year that play a role in our juries. Okay. It's fundamental in our system. I've stood up for juries all of my life, fundamental belief in it, but I don't want the system to collapse. I want it to continue and go from strength to strength.
Was the memo leaked to test public opinion?
Oh, I can't comment why. I don't know why memos were leaked. These things happen. In all my 25 years in politics, of course there can be leaks. They're regrettable and they're unfortunate. What's important is that the government and I will be laying out our position later on in Parliament today. Juries remain the cornerstone of our system. We of course are building on what Sir Brian Leveson has done. Careful, considered work, one of our best judges looking at this issue.
He's talked about 2 magistrates sitting with a judge rather than a single judge. So actually a lot of this has gone further, I should just quickly say.
He has talked about that and I'll comment on that today. But importantly, more money for victims today, more money for criminal barristers today because they play an important role and we need those criminal barristers, and a new scheme for junior barristers so that they're doing criminal legal aid work because previously they've been going into other areas.
Are you aware of any more violent offenders or sex offenders who've been let out of jail by mistake on your watch?
Well, I made a statement to Parliament a few weeks ago, and at that stage I reported, and that was unusual because usually the records are reported in July. 91 people had been released in error. At that stage there were 3 people at large who had been released in error. That figure has come down and I'm pleased about that. But I've said that I'm not going to give a running commentary, Sophie, and the reason for that is we have a system. Data has to be properly validated. We also have a system where if someone is at large, the police are asked to do that.
Are you aware of any more violent offenders or sex offenders?
There have been releases in error since I made that statement, but I'd want to convey that the trend this year is fortunately downwards.
Can you give me a number on how many?
2.
There's been 2?
There have been 2.
And are they still at large or have they been apprehended?
Sophie, it's important that I release that data in the way that it's always been released. And it's also important that I work with police where someone is at large, and sometimes, because the police are about to nab somebody, they actually don't want me to discuss it. And it's important that they get on.
But are those 2 people still at large or not? Are they?
There are 2 people currently at large.
OK, thank you. You're grappling with a court system with a massive backlog.
And a prison system.
A prison system
and a prison
on the
system
brink.
that's paper-based.
I agree. I absolutely understand the prison system and the crisis you've had there. I mean, do you kind of spend your time like thinking back wistfully to that like lovely office in the Foreign Office you used to have? You've got the hardest job in government here.
Well, Sophie, actually on justice, and you've known me for many years, the justice issues have actually been the cornerstone of my political career. It is great to be back in this brief and able to do something about our prisons, do something about our courts, invest and modernise and move forward to build on the work that I did actually with the Conservatives in the Lammy review. We've got a sentencing bill in Parliament. This announcement that I'm making today will lead to a courts bill next year. And I think that we can make a real change. We can see that backlog moving in the right direction. We can build more prisons and rehabilitate prisoners, and I'm excited to do that. And of course, it's the honour of my life to be Deputy Prime Minister and to be supporting Keir Starmer.
Yeah, it's certainly, you can tell it's a brief that you care very deeply about. Thank you very much indeed, David Lammy, speaking to us there. Coming up, we are going to be talking about how safe women feel in public with the Women's Safety Campaigner, Anne Kelly.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
There's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch, wait, right. We're going to get in. Right. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa, oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
Listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent based here in Bangkok.
The only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Update on the headlines, which really come from Sophie's interview just now with the Justice Secretary, Deputy PM David Lammy. What jumped out to you?
Well, I think I was asking him about the mistaken releases of violent and sexual offenders. Obviously, this is something that the Ministry of Justice has come under an awful lot of pressure on that. And he said that since he made the statement at the beginning of November, there have been 2 more mistaken releases, 2 people still at large, which I think just shows that this is something that the justice system and the prison system in particular really is grappling with. He highlighted, though, it should be said, he has emphasised that the number of releases has come down.
Come down, and also not that he's hiding it. There's an important point about, you know, trying to make sure these people get caught. So there's no deception there, but it was a huge acknowledgement, I agree, for him to make live on air. Do you know the other thing just worth noting on that stood out to me? In the month we've had around the budget about leaks and not leaks and testing the policy with the public and seeing reaction, he, I would say, all but acknowledged there was some of that about this memo that got leaked last week around the policies he's talking about today. And you asked him directly, was that memo leaked to test public opinion? And he didn't say no. He said leaks happen. And he basically implied it sort of was for that reason, not just to get the views of the public, which obviously was wildly against the most extreme version of this new policy, but also the Cabinet.
Yeah, the Cabinet thing I thought was interesting as well, because he kind of said that it's something that you would always sort of talk about with Cabinet and you get the views of Cabinet. I mean, he didn't exactly say it, but I think the reading of that perhaps is that there had been a pretty strong Cabinet reaction to the idea of getting rid of all those jury trials too. Now, how safe do women feel in the street, on transport, at parties? And the answer, sadly, is often not very. A new study even shows that around half of women are going to avoid Christmas parties altogether because of fears for their safety.
It's one of the questions being explored in part 2 of the Angiolini inquiry, something that was set up after Sarah Everard was murdered by Met Police officer Wayne Couzens back in 2021.
Today's report comes out at lunchtime, and it's going to look at some of the measures that have been put in place to protect women from sexually motivated crimes in public, while Katie Barnfield's been speaking to women in Liverpool about their experiences.
You wouldn't believe the amount of people who are drunk and go in for a kiss or a hug and stuff. It's so degrading, especially if you've got a crowd of people watching.
Busking in cities like Liverpool, musician Amy Alex gets so much unwanted behaviour, she started posting it on social media.
You put money in this thing doesn't mean I have to give you a hug. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Again, just got really close, started trying to touch me unconsensually.
What was that? You just wiped on me. That was wet.
When I watched it back, you can hear him say pee.
So he said, I've wiped pee on you.
Pee, and I was watching that back editing it, my jaw just dropped and I was horrified. It's not right, and it used to upset me a hell of a lot more than it does now. When I was 21, 22, 23, when I started doing this, I used to go home in tears. It's unfortunately just a bit of a given if you're a woman doing this kind of work.
After Sarah Everard's murder, there was an outpouring of anger about women's safety on the streets. But 4 years on, how much has really changed?
So one of the things that we hand out to the women are safety alarms. It's really handy to just kind of keep on your keys, on your person, and if you pull it out, it makes a really loud noise. One of our women, she will get 2 buses home because that is safer than her waiting in a dark bus stop.
These lunch clubs are a safe space for the members of Tomorrow's Women, a Wirral charity offering support for everything from domestic violence to harassment in public.
You often find with a sexual assault case, the first question can often be, what were you wearing? And it really doesn't matter what the woman was wearing.
Every woman knows this when they're walking home at night.
Yeah, it's a very normal thing for a lot of women.
Something a lot of women worry about, including me, is going out for a run alone in the evenings, especially when it's so dark like this in the winter. At Girls on the Go, they started a women's-only running club for exactly this reason, to get some safety in numbers.
Had a couple of incidents like catcalling, some people almost like trying to chase you.
The second you touch your toes or you go into a squat, whistles out of cars, horns being honked. Every single girl here will have some form of experience around sexual harassment.
One of the issues is it's not taken seriously by society and by police, and I think if it was, then more women would speak out about it and more could be done.
Well, we're joined now to discuss this by the women's safety campaigner and founder of WalkSafe, Emma Kay. She created the app to try and help women feel less vulnerable when they're alone, walking at night, running, all that kind of stuff as well. Emma, we've got the Angelini report out later into women's safety, but I guess my kind of question is, how safe do you think women currently feel?
I don't feel there has been enough of trust and support that has been met for the younger generation. I know that 49% of Gen Zs and 46% of millennials actually still feel very vulnerable and very unsafe. And actually, they will be missing Christmas parties this season because of their safety. They're just going to avoid it altogether. And if we reflect on when the Angelini inquiry came out, that was around the high-profile case of Sarah Everard. And actually, I'd say that group of women and minority groups were the most affected. They felt the most vulnerable and open they ever have because they couldn't trust those stakeholders that they should be relying on.
Stakeholders like the police, right?
Yeah,
you know,
local authorities, police, government, yes.
People who should be keeping them safe. Because you've got this you've done some research, haven't you, looking into how women feel. And I think the thing that really came through is how women are changing their behaviours.
Yeah.
So not going to the Christmas party or, you know, not going to the social event because they're worried about getting home.
Agree, and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, I identify with it. Our research shows that actually women feel more vulnerable once they've had a drink, which, you know, in Britain, we all enjoy ourselves, we should all be able to do that. But actually, we then have to risk assess how we get home. And we do alter our behaviour. We end up spending more money on cabs, on cars, on transport. That equates to £100 extra a month. And actually, 1 in 5 women have been harassed whilst they're taking their commute to and from work. And I just don't think that should be the case. We should be able to live our lives and be free from harm.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about this stuff, actually, because I think it is the kind of thing that men don't, and I don't mean this, but like the kind of checklist in your mind that men don't necessarily have to think about in the same way. And I know men have other dangers and risks too, like I'm really not trying to underplay that, but like, you know, who's that walking behind me? You know, is this someone that I need to, you know, be conscious of and worry about? And what's my escape route if he turns out to be not the person I hope he is? Is the kind of constant
mental load.
Mental load, yeah.
Completely agree. And I think this is where WalkSafe has always been so needed, where there's been mistrust from police and government. Our app has been downloaded over 1 million times. I would say the bulk of my demographic are women, 75% are women. Probably the age range that use it the most are Gen Z to millennial. And I still feel until we have rectified quite a few of these big systemic issues, there will always be a need for us.
Because we've got the Angelini report out later around lunchtime, and the app was obviously, it kind of, I guess it really took off in the wake of Sarah Everard when people were really feeling very unsafe about their safety.
It really did. I mean, we saw 500,000 downloads in 10 days. which is staggering. I think there was this huge call to action. I think that people wanted to have an immediate safety tool that they could use just to show how, you know, they were getting home. They wanted a SOS button. And actually post that, what we have started to see is businesses playing their part. So we have WalkSafe Pro, which basically means that SOS button's connected to one of our partner security firms, Mighty. And actually, whilst they're walking home, if anything were to happen, if they feel unsafe, you know, someone's walking too closely behind them, something's happened, they can hit that SOS button and it will alert them that they need help. And that's really developed out in the past year since we've taken off.
So do you think that companies and employers have got a bit of a responsibility here?
I do.
As well, then?
And I actually think when we reflect back post Sarah Everard, 6-7 years ago, what we did find was the public emphasis was primarily on the public sector, and rightly so. We were let down by police forces and councils. However, what I am starting to see is businesses recognising they've got a huge workforce, they have got money to be able to provide these safety benefits, and actually they should be doing more.
It's really good to have you on, Emma. Thank you very much for coming in today. Emma Kay there, talking about women's safety, and it's obviously something that we should be thinking about all the time, but particularly, of course, with that Angelini report coming out today with Sarah Everard at its heart.
And that comes out lunchtime today, of course, full coverage of that on Sky News throughout the day. Now, Thames Water is in the spotlight again, and that's because several communities have launched statutory nuisance complaints against the company over sewage. The company's admitted it failed to complete much-needed upgrades at dozens of sewage treatment works and pumping stations. And now the locals being affected say they're having to endure dangerously high levels of bacteria. We can speak now to the Olympic champion rower Imogen Grant, who's joined one of those complaints. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad that we can talk about such an important issue.
What is the statutory nuisance complaint that you're a part of? Because I guess many people of your stature have talked about this issue over the last couple of years. What's this being elevated to today?
It's a bit of legalese. A statutory nuisance is something that affects your ability to enjoy part of the land or can significantly impact your health. And dumping sewage into the water really comes under being a statutory nuisance. I wouldn't get away with dumping a bunch of stuff into a river, so why should Thames Water? And so we're sending these letters to our local councils, who then have a responsibility to investigate these statutory nuisances, this dumping of sewage, as another line to force Thames Water to do something about it and clean up its act.
And do you have greater grounds, given some of the rule changes the regulators made in the last year or two, to make these complaints?
I think we have as much grounds as we have for a large number of years. We're basing these complaints off of the fact that 93 different improvement works haven't been completed by 2025, which is when they were promised to be completed. And the levels of E. coli and pollution in the water is still really high. Just this week, the level of E. coli in my local stretch is 2,000. 900 is the safe limit.
And what effect does that have on rowers and other people who are using the river or close to the river?
It's just not very pleasant. It can smell sometimes. I can see these massive islands of scum that build up on the top of the water. It's something that I think about every single time that I go rowing. And I'm just there trying to enjoy my time on the river and train for something really important like the World Championships.
Do you think that the government and I guess the regulator have done enough in this area? They've, I guess, tried to address things. They've campaigned on this area. Would you like to see more?
I absolutely would like to see more. And I know that there's a white paper coming out soon from the government, and I'm interested to see what they have to say on this matter and in response to water quality. But I think we do need to go further. At River Action, we're pushing for Thames Water to be taken into special administration because clearly they've shown that they're not solving their problems by themselves.
Imogen Grant, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Still to come here on Mornings, we're going to be watching Ali Bunkle's extraordinary report. He's travelled with authorities trying to clamp down on drug smuggling gangs getting cocaine into Spain. We're watching that next.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Mornings. Sky News has been given rare access to an elite unit of Spanish police officers working around the clock to try and stop drugs getting into Europe.
So Andalusia has long been used as a hub for narco-strike gangs to get cocaine into the continent. And authorities are obviously using all the tools at their disposal to try and stop them in their tracks. But look, the smugglers have, I think it's fair to say, got the upper hand at the minute.
Our Europe correspondent, Ali Bunkle, joined the force on their latest mission to hunt down criminals at sea under the cover of night.
It's midnight and we're at sea hunting for drug smugglers with an elite unit from the Spanish police. The narco boat has come from North Africa.
Va, sube. Está echando un montón de agua. Es una goma, creo yo, ¿eh?
Que no se distingue bien. A ver, déjame subir. Por si acaso. Sí, dale.
They're trying to reach Spain, one of the main gateways into Europe.
Bueno.
Es una goma.
Pillo, dale, una goma.
Viene pegando unos pantocazos.
Es una goma. Es una goma. Va navegando fatal.
Viene pegando pantocazos.
Sí, es una goma.
In the sea behind us, an officer is tracking the smugglers through an infrared camera. We're moving fast, off the Strait of Gibraltar, a busy stretch of water only 8 miles across at its narrowest. It is a race, and the odds are against us. So we're going 43 knots, they're going 50 knots, and this is the chase. And the smugglers will know exactly where they are. They'll know where Spanish waters end and Moroccan waters start, and they will go back into Moroccan waters. And at that point, there's nothing that the Spanish police can do. The police unit works in the dark. It is almost pitch black on board. This is the most dangerous moment as the two boats close in at speed. We're just about to see for ourselves the risks they take every single night.
Are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah.
In the dark, we've crashed into a series of massive waves made deliberately by the narco boat to evade the police.
Are you okay? Okay.
It's worked. We watch them escape.
Well, Ali, I'm delighted to say, joins us now from Brussels. Ali, this is extraordinary access that you had and really kind of compelling footage. Can you just set it up for us, first of all? I mean, how big a problem is this for the region, Andalusia, for Spain as a whole? Is it one of the big entry points for drugs into Europe?
Yeah, it is, because you have that sort of proximity between that southern coast of Spain and Africa, and it really is so close. I mean, the narrowest point of the Strait of Gibraltar, I think I said there, is about 8 miles. So when you're travelling at speed, you know, it's no distance whatsoever. So there's drugs coming in from North Africa, but also the drug smugglers are bringing cocaine in particular from South America, and they're using submarines, some makeshift submarines, making that journey, and then they offload them onto the fast boats to bring them into Europe. So Spain, and so the likes of Portugal, France and Italy, but Spain in particular is very sort of well placed for the drug smugglers. And I think two of the things I took away from it, one, you know, this is happening the whole time. Those patrols are going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there were 5 boats, smuggler boats, out in the water when we intercepted that one. And secondly, the drug smugglers are better funded, better resourced than the police themselves. So this is a game that the smugglers are winning.
In terms of once they do get successful trips into Spain, do we know where that goes from there? Is it one of the biggest supply routes for all of continental Europe, possibly the UK as well, or does it stay in Spain?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, firstly, it's hard to know exactly how much gets in because the police, the security authorities know what they intercept. What they don't know is what they haven't managed to intercept. But I mean, you know, their guess is, and it's a pretty well-educated guess, is that tons and tons are getting in the whole time. I mean, they catch far fewer smugglers than those that get through. So a lot of it is flooding in. And once it makes land, it's very difficult to track because then it goes in the backs of lorries, etc., and goes across Europe. And they told me that once it hits land, it can be on the streets, they reckon, of the UK, France, Germany, within 24 hours of hitting land in Spain.
Wow, it's honestly extraordinary to hear you talk about it in this way. And obviously, you know, we're all aware of, you know, the kind of prevalence of drugs in the UK and across Europe as well. But I guess my kind of question is, having spent the time at the real kind of front line of this, is there much that can be done, do you think, to stop this? Or is this a war that, like, frankly, we're just going to continue to lose?
Well, I mean, you know, the battle really begins in the drug manufacturing areas like South America, like Africa. But in terms of what could be done in Europe, I think, you know, what the police clearly need is far more money and resources to be able to compete with the smugglers. I mean, more often than not, they're outrun on the water. So the smugglers have these 12-foot inflatable boats with 350 horsepower engines on the back. So their boats can go up to 100 kilometers an hour, and they just outrun the police. I mean, you almost need a military operation to try and stop them with surveillance in the air and on the water. And actually later on, there's a much longer film than that, and that's a snippet of it. We do also speak to one of the smugglers. Now, he tells us he is the leader of the biggest gang in Spain. So he is one of the kingpins, and he speaks very matter of fact about how it happens. He said, I've got boats on the water right now as we're speaking, coming in, bringing cocaine and hashish. And he says it's a game, and, you know, we know that we are going to get some of our stuff intercepted, but you know what, most of it gets through, and we know that we're going to make massive, massive profits out of it, profits into the millions and millions of pounds.
Ali, as always, thanks so much, and do make sure to watch Ali's full report. Extraordinary footage in it, an important story behind it as well. The QR code on your screen right now for that.
And now we talk a lot about social media on this programme because, look, frankly, so many alarm bells are being rung about its use. And a new study today has found that more than 800,000 young children younger than 5 years old, 3 to 5 years old, are already engaging with social media. So this is a survey of parents that was done for Ofcom by the Centre for Social Justice, who is a kind of a think tank set up by Ian Duncan Smith. And they found that 37% of parents of 3 to 5 year olds say that they are using at least one social media platform, which is up from 29% in 2023.
Yeah, and the rise is obviously significant. I almost can't believe the statistic. 37% say their children aged 3 to 5 are using social media. I read the full Times article on this. I need to get the actual report, but I can't believe that's having their own Facebook or Instagram or X account.
No.
It's maybe scrolling on one of these
Yeah.
particular websites,
And
which is less bad than the headline suggests,
Yeah.
but still striking.
And it may include YouTube as well, I think, is the other thing, which I think a lot of parents use to buy a bit of time in restaurants and stuff like that. One thing that really stood out to me, though, is one teacher told the Kindred Squared charity as part of this report, and she said, I've got 2 children in my class who physically can't sit on the carpet. And she went to visit one of these girls at home to find out what was going on. And she said it was because she'd been sat on a corner sofa on an iPad, not going to any nursery. So she hadn't developed the core strength necessary to sit on a carpet, which I think just really... It's when you start hearing these alarm bells that are being rung by teachers, and don't get me wrong, there's no judgment here on parents who, might feel because they've got a big work call or they're in a crisis, they might hand their phone or an iPad, but there is something going on here, I think.
Obviously, it all comes as Australia's implementing that ban on no social media sites for under 16. So, we had that debate yesterday with someone. I think it's great. We're going to get data on this. Give it 6 months.
Yeah.
Let's see how it works in a society that has sort of similar demographics and habits and tastes as ours, and we'll get to find out if it works or not. I mean, I do think it's important to get the framing of this right. I think kids have always watched cartoons. They might be doing that now on YouTube. That's not the same as having your own social media account.
Yeah, I think that's totally
We're out of time. We could have debated that for much longer, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have all of the day's top stories. Don't go there.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Good morning. It is 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf. Good morning from the both of us. Let's get to it.
The Justice Secretary tells us there have been 2 additional mistaken prisoner releases since he promised to crack down on the issue last month.
It comes as he plans a major overhaul of the Crown Courts, hoping to clear the backlog and hand more support to victims.
The boss of the NHS in England calls a new resident doctor strike planned in the run-up to Christmas totally reckless behaviour.
During the busiest period for the NHS, we're going to ask the BMA whether their decision is a step too far.
Plus, Sky News joins Spanish police on a mission to intercept drug runners on a notorious route from Africa.
Good morning. Welcome to the programme. The Justice Secretary and the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, has told this programme a further 2 prisoners have been accidentally released, and that was since he made a statement to MPs last month, promising to crack down on the issue. He was on to talk about court reforms, I should say. We'll get onto that in a moment. But first, he did reveal 2 people who had been mistakenly freed and are still at large.
When I made a statement to Parliament a few weeks ago, and at that stage I reported, and that was unusual because usually the records are reported in July. 91 people had been released in error. At that stage, there were 3 people at large who had been released in error. That figure has come down, and I'm pleased about that. But I've said that I'm not going to give a running commentary, Sophie, and the reason for that is we have a system. Data has to be properly validated. We also have a system where if someone is at large, the police are asked to do that.
Are you aware of any more violent offenders or sex offenders?
There have been releases in error since I made that statement, but I'd want to convey that the trend this year is fortunately downwards.
Can you give me a number on how many?
2.
There's been 2?
There have been 2.
And are they still at large, or have they been apprehended?
Sophie, it's important that I release that data in the way that it's always been released. And it's also important that I work with police where someone is at large, and sometimes, because the police are about to nab somebody, they actually don't want me to discuss it. And it's important that they get under.
But are those 2 people still at large or not? Are they?
There are 2 people currently at large.
Extraordinary revelation there, live in that interview this morning. Well, Robert Jenrick responded to it. He's tweeted, Calamity Lammy admits 2 more dangerous prisoners have been mistakenly released, but he won't say who they are or where they are. When will this fiasco end? Of course, Mari's here to discuss more of this with us. And as Sophie said, he came on to talk about justice system reform, which we'll come to. But this is the biggest headline from the interview.
I mean, it is. Also, this is one of the first moments that David Lammy's been kind of under the microscope since that catastrophic common statement when he was aware of people on the loose not saying they were, and all of that unfolded. It wasn't that long ago. So the difficulty for David Lammy is that he's now having to make sure he appears to be transparent as and when he can, because he was accused of being anything but in the chamber not very long ago. Now, you read out that tweet from Robert Jenrick accusing him of not giving us enough details, and Lammy did say to you, Sophie, didn't he, that one of the reasons he wasn't giving details was that in some cases it might not be helpful to release that information to the public if the police are trying to, let's say, keep it secret for a particular reason. But nonetheless, it gives that impression of a lack of control. The one thing I would also just point out with the Robert Jenrick response is it's not like this didn't happen under the Conservatives. No. It did. It's not like there were never any mistaken releases under the Tories. This happened under both parties. Yes, it went up under Labour, and Labour have admitted that, but it's not like this was never the case under the Tories either.
There's more transparency about it now, to be honest. Well, we probably wouldn't have found out about it before.
Also, the court reform stuff obviously was a big part of the interview. So what did we learn from that? Because I guess, somewhat amazingly, coming into the interview, we still didn't know all of the details of what he's planning to announce today.
I know, it was almost bizarre, wasn't it? So he's basically said, wait until the statement and I'll give you more details. But then I found it really interesting. So he said, we're looking at some other ways, some either way cases, so those when they can either be Crown Court or Magistrates Court, could be tried in magistrates or in a new division in the Crown Court. So that is almost a kind of a bit of a fudge from basically what we have at the moment, what it sounds like to me. He also did accept there was a leak and so therefore confirmed actually that what was leaked was real and was actually what ministers were told, and then wouldn't want to get into how it all got out or whether there was an agenda behind that. But really, what he was saying to you, Sophie, from what he would give us, the kind of scraps that he would give us, sounded absolutely nothing like what we heard last week.
Yeah.
So it feels to me like that, as you rightly put to him, his mind has changed.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he talked about the cabinet process, which made me think, and look, this is speculation, I should say, hands up, but it did make me feel like there had been a cabinet backlash to what had come across last week as well.
Well, I mean, you asked him directly, was it leaked to test the waters? And he didn't say no, and went on to say there's always leaks. And so it does make it certainly feel like, whether it was because of public pushback or he specifically mentioned the word cabinet pushback, that plans have changed in the course of the last week, perhaps because the changes were seen as too controversial.
Yeah, that was the impression, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mara, thank you very much indeed. Mari, they're taking you through a very, very busy day for the Ministry of Justice.
Yeah, more to come, obviously, from David Lammy later on today as well. And we spent the last almost week digesting the budget and trying to get to grips with what the budget means for our finances. So it's a good time to try and work out how it's all gone down with you at home, with the public.
Now, a new poll by YouGov and Sky News shows that when it comes to the economy, people's trust in the government is even lower than it was when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has got the details.
The budget fallout continues. The question everyone's been asking of Rachel Reeves, can you trust me? Well, now we've got the answer with the help of YouGov. And here's the question we've been asking for the last couple of days. Did the Chancellor exaggerate the bad economic news in order to put up taxes? Here's the public verdict. 37% thought she presented an overly negative view of the economy in the run-up to the budget. That's almost twice the percentage that thought she was broadly honest. 13% thought she was overly positive. We always exclude the don't knows, but that's not the backdrop to the budget that she would want to see. So let's look at the individual tax and spend measures last week and how they have gone down now the dust has settled a little bit. Now, the green is people who agree with measures. The red is those who don't. And you can see from the main spending measures, actually the public pretty much like them. Fuel duty freeze, business rate cuts, energy bill cuts. But arguably the totemic measure in the budget is this one, the two-child benefit cap, 58% don't like it. Now let's look at the tax measures, and some, like gambling tax, well, that's pretty popular. But the massive measures in the budget are really quite unpopular. Freezing income tax threshold, the electric vehicle tax, and changes to pensions for people in work. You can see all that red there, not happy at all. So where has this left Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and its economic reputation? Well, you can see here, this red line is people that think that Labour are the best placed party to manage the economy. And you can see after Keir Starmer became Labour, broadly speaking, did a good job. It became the top party. It overtook the Conservatives in late 2022. But here's the thing. Look at this line here. That's when Labour was elected. And look at the sharp drop almost immediately. And here, this is the latest data point. Let me just come around. It's actually dropped lower here than at any point since either Jeremy Corbyn was leader or lower than the Tories had when Liz Truss did her mini budget. Again, fairly disastrous here on 10%. Now, let's look at some other budget measures. Here we go. This is the proportion of people that think this budget will make the country better off. That's just 8%, 29%. Not much difference, but a whopping 52% think that this budget will make the country worse off. And then there's the question of trust. Do people think it breaches the manifesto? 57% think that it does, compared to just 13% that it doesn't. None of these results from YouGov are the kind of things that Rachel Reeves wants to see as she's trying to reset the public finance and restore the public's trust in her as Chancellor.
More on Sam and YouGov's poll there on politics at Sam and Anne's on those quite striking results in reaction to the budget.
We just want to bring you the latest pictures of the Pope. This is Pope Leo. He's in Lebanon. He just arrived in Beirut. This is the site of a deadly explosion at the port that happened in 2020. 218 people killed by the blast, and they were all kind of holding up photos of their loved ones. You can see the Pope there meeting some of the people there in Beirut. And really that explosion, I guess, I think it's fair to say, became a bit of a symbol of Lebanon's dysfunction and the country still bearing the scars from what happened when the explosion tore through Beirut and did billions of dollars in damage as well when ammonium nitrate detonated in the warehouse. But you can see now, 5 years on, the Pope making that visit to meet some of the families who are still seeking justice for what happened there.
Those pictures from just moments ago. Now, resident doctors in England are set to go on strike again. The British Medical Association has announced a 5-day walkout from the 17th of December.
So the boss of NHS England has described the move as totally reckless behaviour. We can talk now to our correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Miocic. I can't work. How many times have the doctors been on strike now? It has gone on for some time.
14 times now since 2023. And if you're a patient and you've been looking forward to a surgery, a procedure in the lead up to Christmas, potentially hoping that you're going to have it done before the big day, and now there is this potential that that could be delayed or it could be cancelled, you can imagine how this makes patients feel. The BMA says the reason that they're going on strike now is because the government still hasn't come back with a credible pay offer for resident doctors who were previously known as junior doctors, so the doctors that just graduate from university and then head into hospitals before they start their career. And they also say that there's a jobs crisis and that a third of these newly graduated resident doctors haven't got a job. But the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says he was willing to put more jobs on the table. And if you look back at the past 3 years, the government has increased the pay rates to doctors by about 28.9%. He's saying that the BMA is playing politics somewhat because they didn't take that offer to their members and they've rejected it outright.
In terms of the dates in particular and what the head of the NHS England said, just remind us when it all falls.
So 17th of December to the 22nd of December, so just 3 days shy of Christmas. And it's a key moment because we've got winter pressures that are already starting, ambulance services already reporting an increase in calls, a predicted quite bad flu season is on the way. We've already seen it in Australia, potential for it to hit here. And so the fear is if you've got doctors who are going on strike at a key time when the NHS could already be facing the pressure, then those problems could be exacerbated.
Oliver, great stuff. As always, thank you very much. By the way, later this hour, we're going to be speaking to the Deputy Chair of the BMA's Resident Doctors Committee, Dr. Shivam Sharma, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, we'll put the questions you've got.
Yeah, we will. It's definitely one worth watching. I'll be very interested to see what Wilf is going to be asking in that one. And yeah, as Wilf was saying, let us know what you think about the planned strike. Is it fair? Do you have any questions for what's happening? The address is mornings@sky.uk. That system going on there.
You might have guessed what our next story is, because you might have just got a glimpse of Ivor Bennett, who will be joining us now, because we're going to talk about the latest in the Ukraine-Russia peace talks. And in a high-profile way, Steve Witkoff is travelling to Moscow to put across the latest negotiations to the US side. And he's accompanied by somebody, as of a couple of days ago, was unexpected. Let's bring in Ivor Bennett. Ivor, tell us about who is coming to Moscow from the US side and why perhaps it's significant.
Yeah, hi, Wilf. So Steve Witkoff this time will be joined by Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, who's joined the US negotiating teams in the past week or so. He was in Florida over the weekend when they met the Americans, and he's going to be in Moscow today. I'm not sure exactly what time they arrive, but I think that really reflects the added energy and impetus that the Americans are injecting into their efforts to try and close the deal and get things over the line. All we know for sure is that this meeting between them and Vladimir Putin will happen in the second half of the day. That's what the Kremlin has said. Unfortunately, we're not going to get anywhere near it. It'll be behind closed doors. But I expect we will see some pictures of the Americans meeting with Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin normally releases some footage showing Vladimir Putin greeting Steve Witkoff, and in the past he normally enjoys a warm welcome from the Russian president. The two appear to get on very well. And worth just recapping where we are with the peace process. So it's nearly 2 weeks now since a 28-point peace plan first emerged, one that heavily favoured Russia, remember. Then the Ukrainians and the Europeans got together and said, hang on a minute, how about this proposal instead? They put forward a counter-proposal. And then after 2 sets of talks between the Americans and the Ukrainians, the US side said they have an updated framework, with Donald Trump claiming that they are close to reaching a deal. But I think the question remains, as ever, is Vladimir Putin going to agree to anything less than his maximalist demands? And the signs over the past week or so are no. He always says that Russia is ready to agree to peace, but then almost in the next breath kind of lists all of Russia's old conditions and demands. So it seems to be a case of yes to peace, but only on our terms and time frame, and I expect it'll be the same message today.
Ivor, just quickly, can you update us on the latest on the ground as well?
Yeah, well, it was late last night that the Kremlin made this announcement that they have that Russian forces have claimed and captured 2 Ukrainian towns, Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region and Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. Ukraine hasn't confirmed this regarding either town, but if it's true, it would mark Russia's biggest gains in some time, particularly Pokrovsk. This was a key target for them, and they published this footage on social media showing Russian forces flying the Russian tricolour in what they say is the centre of Pokrovsk, although we haven't been able to independently verify this. But they also published footage of Putin visiting his generals at a command post, wearing military fatigues, claiming that this apparent gain will allow them to make more gains, unlocking more territory for them. And this all feels like a carefully calculated message designed, I think, to show the Americans as they head to Moscow, look, we are the ones on top on the battlefield, and therefore we should be the ones calling the shots in the negotiations, reinforcing this idea, I think, that Russia is in no mood to make any concessions.
Ivor, great stuff. Thanks so much.
So the automatic right to a trial by jury was going to be scrapped for most defendants under government plans, but it looks like they've now been rowed back on. They are, of course, trying to tackle court backlogs.
Well, the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, will remove jury trials in cases where defendants face offences which carry sentences under 5 years.
So I think that was what was going to be happened in the report that was leaked last week. But what is going to happen today, I think, remains to be seen. It's probably fair to say. To discuss this, we're joined now by the former Justice Secretary, Lord Gove, and the Chief Executive at the Centre for Women's Justice, Harriet Wistrich. Great to have you here. Michael, I think it is fair to say that you're probably more familiar than some of us in the kind of political machinations, what politicians say, what they really mean. What do you think is going on with this?
Well, I think, Sophie, you characterised it correctly. I think that there was a leak last week. Whether or not that came direct from the Justice Ministry and from David Lammy's team or from someone opposed to the proposals, it gave everyone an opportunity to comment on quite sweeping plans to get rid of jury trial. I think following on from that public reaction, which was broadly sceptical, if not hostile, I think that David Lammy is now putting forward a set of proposals which will restrict jury trials, but to a lesser extent than was outlined last week.
Harriet, what's your view to the principle of reducing the amount of jury trials, given the extraordinary demands on the backlog of cases to be heard?
Well, I mean, I think the point to be made is that we have this incredibly huge backlog, which is nearly up to it's about 80,000 at the moment, and rising in terms of the length of time that people are waiting. We've been supporting victims of rape who are waiting. I think it's an average of nearly 500 days from the point at which a charge is announced to the trial, and that's on top of very long delays in police investigations, Crown prosecution decisions. So we've got this huge backlog, and that is having a terrible, terrible impact on victims of rape, sexual offences, and other crimes as well. So that I think we just have to look at the problem, which means that many are dropping out. Some people have even taken their own lives. It's also bad for defendants as well. So let's just sort of set the...
Can I ask you something to kind of follow up on what Wilf was just saying there? Is there a case for rape and sexual offences, but particularly rape, to not be tried by a jury? Because I know that the Scottish National Party recommended at one point a pilot scheme into this, because we know that, you know, getting a rape conviction is hard. We know that obviously all crimes, these delays matter, but for rape cases it really matters. Is that something you'd like to see? Because I kind of think it's kind of almost a bit weird that the one thing that we haven't talked about removing jury trial is
well, ironically, insofar as we don't know exactly what the proposals are, we know that Brian Levison, who was the judge that undertook a very detailed study into looking at different sorts of solutions for this huge backlog and crisis in our criminal justice system, made recommendations, but they wouldn't actually have affected rape trials or murder trials or the very serious trials, which I think, you know, even the leaked document is saying jury trials would remain. I think it's an entirely separate question about whether or not juries work for everyone. I think juries are, you know, have been a principle in the whole British justice system for years. They're you know, the whole principle of a trial by your peers, where in circumstances where, you know, judges were always from a, you know, very sort of elite upper class background, and it was important, you know, particularly in relation to crimes, you know, sort of day-to-day crimes. Rape is slightly different because of the sort of attitudes around, you know, misogyny, rape myths and stereotypes and so on, which does affect, you know, in our experience, juries. So there may be reasons to explore that, but, you know, those are kind of sort of a separate question from the question of resourcing for the criminal justice system.
Michael, stepping back from all of the politics on this, clearly a huge part of the problems in the justice system were inherited.
Yes.
Maybe they've got a bit worse, maybe they haven't. And something has to be done to try and solve this problem. Is it fair to limit the amount of jury trials to some extent? And is that something that might be against your principles, but with the pragmatism that's needed to solve the problem, might it be needed?
No, it's a mistake. I hugely sympathise with people who are waiting for justice, for victims who have to wait, exactly as Harriet says, in some very serious offences for a period of time that is unbelievably long, wearing, emotionally difficult. But you should not make the justice system apparently more efficient by curtailing a fundamental liberty. We're talking here about a right that individuals have to ensure that their case can be fully heard in front of 12 good men and women and true. We're getting rid of that. It's been part of our system for 1,000 years. There are other things that we can do in order to improve the criminal justice system, from the way in which the police investigate crimes, to the way in which prosecutors make their case in court, to even the way in which the courts themselves sit. There are many days when the courts are empty. There are many hours when they are not being used that we could deploy in order to make sure that we have fast and effective justice without getting rid of a fundamental freedom.
Why didn't the Conservatives do those things?
Well, there were moments when we did ensure that we used our courts more efficiently, particularly during the riots in the first or early years of the coalition government. One of the things that I tried to do when I was Justice Secretary was ask the question, why isn't every court as efficient as those courts which are fastest in dealing with these crimes? One of the problems is that the police, the CPS, and indeed some in the judiciary are defensive, and rather than looking to their own weaknesses, try to pass the parcel on to others.
Can I ask you about an admission that David Lammy made this morning in an interview with us, basically saying that since he made the statement to the House in November talking about the number of mistaken prisoners that had been released, there have been more releases. 2 of those people still at large. Robert Jenrick's come out with quite a political reaction, saying he's like calamity Lammy. Others may have a bit more sympathy, saying he's trying to be transparent here. What's your take on it?
Well, this has been an enduring problem, and it's one we've discussed before, Sophie, as you know. Here, I think that David Lammy is on slightly firmer ground because we do have a situation where the prison estate is operating at full capacity. So more mistakes have been made. I think, as we've pointed out in the past, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of people who've been released in error, and there may be other factors behind that as well, but the fundamental factor is that you have a prison system that can't cope at the moment, and that is one of the reasons why, while I wholeheartedly oppose getting rid of juries, I do have some sympathy with sentencing reform in order to ensure that more criminals who are found guilty of genuinely low-level offences serve their sentence outside prison rather than in jail.
What are low-level offences?
Well, antisocial behaviour, for example. And I think that there is a merit in ensuring that people are there in the community, clearing up the mess that's been created, putting something back, making sure that their victims visibly see the criminal or the perpetrator atoning for their crime, because that's the way in which we can ensure that our prisons are more efficient and those in prison are educated and rehabilitated.
Harriet, when you see news of further accidental early releases, I mean, does a thought need to... We think about safety, we think about lots of factors, but also to the victims of the crime that was committed. Is it sort of an insult?
Well, I mean, obviously, if somebody, particularly who represents danger, you know, domestic violence perpetrators, for example, are released early, that is going to cause, you know, huge alarm. The prison crisis, you know, the prisons are in crisis. You know, things are really, really bad, and I agree that we do need to look at other ways in which we can tackle the numbers in prison and focus particularly on many, you know, lower-level offenders who don't represent the sort of danger. I mean, there's many women in prison, for example, who, you know, they're because of not, you know, renewing their TV licence, for example, which is, you know, something which doesn't seem like the right place for prison at all, and it has a huge knock-on effect for, you know, children and people that they care for and so on. So I think there are all sorts of things to do. We have got our criminal justice system and policing in a state of crisis. I'm hoping that there'll be some other positive announcements today, and you know, the juries abolishing, you know, or limiting juries is going to be a very anxious thing to do. But more broadly, I think there are things that can be done to address this problem.
Harriet, Michael, thank you both very much. Great to have you with us on this very important story. We're going to take a break afterwards. We're going to be talking about a new book that's out on Margaret Thatcher. Don't go there.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Hey, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch way. Right, we're going to get in. Right. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them, quite often, is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw two guys, two bad people.
There's an absolutely packed
dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
The only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
When you're asked to think about Margaret Thatcher, you've possibly got this clip in mind.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Oh, it's just one of those moments, iconic moments, I think, in kind of British politics, it's fair to say. And look, you know, UK's first female Prime Minister, some people love her, some people hate her. We can speak now to the author of a new biography about Mrs Thatcher, Tina Godwan. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
I'm so intrigued by the fact you call her an incidental feminist. What does that mean?
Well, what I mean by that is that I think just by dint of the fact that she normalised a woman being in power, she is, to all of us women out there, a feminist, whether you agree with that or not. Because without her, earlier on, we would not have any notion of what it meant to be a woman in power. She really defined that for us, I think.
But I guess you're bothering to say that and make that point because at the time, or even since, a lot of feminists, you're saying, don't believe she was a real supporter of women's rights.
Yeah, well, it's true to say that when she was in power, she did not bring a lot of women along with her. But at that point in time, it's also true to say that there were not that many women in politics, firstly. And secondly, that she, as far as she was concerned, first-wave feminism had done its bit. It had got women the vote. So I think she felt that that wasn't relevant. I think she very much felt that women should be judged on their own merits and not given a leg up in any way.
I also would argue that, as a feminist, I'm someone who identifies as a feminist myself, that feminism is also about not making women fit in a box. Like, you know, the whole point of it is that women should be able to have different views, different opinions, different political persuasions, different ways of approaching it. There is not just kind of one generic woman, if that makes sense. So we shouldn't expect her to always, I guess, you know, agree with everything that other women of different political persuasions might think.
No, I agree with you. I don't think we should. And I think the fact that she actually opened the doors for so many of us was incredibly helpful to thousands, if not millions, of women who have followed in her footsteps. And we can't, as you say, expect every woman who's in power to be the same. But I do think she thought that this women and feminism thing was a distraction. I mean, I think you can see that now with Badenoch and Reeves. I think you can see that there's a sort of female versus female kind of punch-up, and she would have thought that distracted from the job at hand, really, and that was something she was very much against.
What was your reaction to that exchange last week?
I thought what she would have thought, which is it's a distraction. It's very easy for people to pit women against women. It's a really old trope, and it's a very easy trope. And actually, what we should be focusing on is the job they're doing for the country, really.
Don't you think she'd have agreed with Kemi Badenoch, though, that Rachel Reeves was playing, you know, the misogyny card?
Yes, I do think that. I think that she thought also that the misogyny card was a total waste of time and energy. Yeah, I do.
Can I ask a different question about Thatcher more broadly? Because I think now when we look back on her time, her premiership, you see her as quite a radical reformer that really changed the shape of the nation, and as someone that was hugely successful. But it took time. And I guess my question on that is whether there are lessons for the government today that you need to bring people along with you, of governments of all political persuasions, I mean, and that you can't make drastic changes overnight. And a huge part of leadership is actually convincing the people of your... Because the first term was not that radical.
You're quite right. The first time was not that radical, and a lot of people think that without the Falklands War, she wouldn't have survived another term. It was very much the Falklands War which swung public opinion in behind her. So in a sense, people think that she was quite lucky in a way, if you can say that about a war, which I don't actually believe. But in a way, politically, it really, really helped her along. And I think it meant that the public were willing to give her time. But what I would also say about her, in contrast, I think, to the current government, is that she had a perspective very early on. She was very clear in her views, and she continued those views throughout. She didn't deviate from them. And we all knew from the beginning exactly what she thought and exactly what she stood for. And I think that's a problem today, generally.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess, this is the whole thing with Thatcher. There will be some people in communities around the UK, and look, some people watching as well, who will never forgive her for what she did to their communities, for what they did to, the jobs, and they would say that she's left scars in those communities. But she, like you said, she was a conviction politician. She wasn't one of these kind of politicians by focus group, and she got elected on it.
But can I also take you up on that point, which is I think we forget, and history, in a sense, conveniently forgets, that we were quite late in the post-industrialisation process. A lot of countries were deindustrialising before we did. But in fact, I think partially because she was a woman, if it had been a man, it would have been a man making tough decisions. Because she was a woman, it was a woman wrecking those communities. It's very different, double standards.
Margaret Thatcher, milk snatcher and all that kind of stuff. Really interesting to get a perspective.
Tina, thanks for joining us.
So we're talking today about how safe women feel in the street, on transport, out and about in general.
This question being explored in part 2 of the Angiolini inquiry, something that was initially set up after Sarah Everard was murdered by Met Police officer Wayne Couzens back in 2021.
So today's report comes out at lunchtime, and it's going to look at some of the measures that have been put in place to protect women from sexually motivated crimes in public. Earlier, I spoke to the women's safety campaigner and WalkSafe founder Emma Kay about whether women do actually feel safe.
I don't feel there has been enough of trust and support that has been met for the younger generation. I know that 49% of Gen Zs and 46% of millennials actually still feel very vulnerable and very unsafe. And actually, they will be missing Christmas parties this season because of their safety. They're just going to avoid it altogether. And if we reflect on when the Angiolini inquiry came out, that was around the high-profile case of Sarah Everard. And actually, I'd say that group of women and minority groups were the most affected. They felt the most vulnerable and open they ever have because they couldn't trust those stakeholders that they should be relying on.
Let's bring in Molly Malone. Molly, good morning to you. So when are we hearing more about this phase 2 of this inquiry, and what's exactly its remit and what's expected?
Well, we expect around lunchtime to mark the beginning of phase 2 of this independent inquiry, which was commissioned back in 2021 after the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving Metropolitan Police officer Wayne Couzens. Now, if that phase 1 was really looked at the specifics of that case, the missed opportunities, the red flags that the inquiry believes should have been noted about Wayne Couzens as he made his way and his career through the police service, this is supposed to be much more about society, about the measures or perhaps lack of measures that this inquiry feels are in place to protect women in public spaces, particularly protecting women, preventing sexually motivated motivated crimes. We know that the initial stage was very much focused on the specifics of Wayne Couzens. People will remember he staged a fake arrest in 2021 of Sarah when she'd been walking home on the night of the 3rd of March in 2021. It found that there were various missed opportunities by various different police forces. It said, the inquiry, that Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer and that various authorities missed opportunities to not let him progress through various different police forces. But as we know, the case of Sarah Everard really lit a touch paper in our society. It sparked months of protests, of outrage, and really people, women, sharing their own stories about not feeling safe in society. And you only need to look at polling, you only need to speak to your friends about the issues that they find and continue to find day in, day out, whether that be taking public transport, whether that be walking home at night. So it's those types of issues that Lady Angelini will look to tease out in this report, with the final report expected next year, looking much more at the police procedures again in terms of vetting and in terms of recruitment.
Molly, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. We're going to be covering that all day as and when those details come out around lunchtime. Now, the British Medical Association's confirmed that doctors will go on strike in the run-up to Christmas over pay. Resident doctors will stage a walkout from 7 a.m. on the 17th of December until 7 a.m. on the 22nd of December. We're joined now by the Deputy Chair of the British Medical Association's Resident Doctors Committee, Dr. Shivan Sharma. Thanks so much for joining us. Good morning to you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
What's the issue that's triggered you to stage another walkout?
Well, we have this crazy situation where patients are waiting longer than ever for appointments, but doctors are unemployed, searching for work. In my own specialty, child and adolescent psychiatry, there's about 22 doctors applying for one job, and this is at a time when patients are waiting over 22 months to see a doctor. This is a complete failure of leadership, and it was entirely preventable. And what we're saying is we want to prioritise these UK graduates that taxpayers' money has gone into training instead of aggressively recruiting for overseas. We want to prioritise those UK graduates and those that have vastly and significantly contributed to the NHS, and sustainably increase the number of jobs available to doctors. These are simple solutions to fixable problems, and we want this to be fixed immediately.
The Health Secretary obviously says he's willing and keen to address that issue, but not able to offer the pay rise you want in the short term. Is that a fair framing of things? Are you also after a pay rise?
Well, this is a dispute on both jobs and pay, and on jobs, he's not prepared to go fast enough. He said that he's looking at it being solved over a number of years. We need it to be solved now, when patients are waiting longer than ever in corridors, waiting over 12 hours in A&E when, the waits used to be less than 4. And we're also turning away 13 doctors for every 1 A&E post. That is completely ludicrous. Currently, you need a PhD, written a chapter in a medical textbook, and multiple publications to even have a chance of getting an interview for medical training. That is ludicrous. And yes, there is a dispute on pay, and we're looking to do a deal over a number of years to restore that pay. And ultimately, we're going by Mr. Westreeting's own words, which is we want a journey to pay restoration. So these are very much fixable solutions. And even since the last strike, we wrote to the government and they didn't even bother writing back. We want to do a deal, so we urge the government to come forward and negotiate.
I think I'm right in saying that your pay has gone up for resident doctors nearly 30% over 3 years, and it went up earlier this year by 5.4%, which is obviously ahead of inflation and ahead of many people in this sort of tough economic environment. Obviously, we've just had a budget. Many tough choices were made. The government is getting criticism left, right and centre for any of the choices they made, and taxes have gone up significantly. Realistically, the government doesn't have money, Westreeting doesn't have money from the Chancellor to add to the pay rises that you've already got in the short term. Is this extra strike going to achieve anything other than pain for patients?
Well, when I first graduated in 2019, I never thought we'd have to go on strike even one day, but I worked through the pandemic and I saw patients not get the care that they deserve. I saw my colleagues leave. I saw doctors being put in a system that sets them up to fail. And what we're saying is we need to have a system that retains doctors instead of aggressively recruiting them from overseas. And before we were being paid about £14 an hour about 3 years ago, and now that's risen to about £18.50 an hour, and what we're asking for is £22.50 an hour, and that can be done over a number of years. Look, retention is always cheaper than recruiting, and that is why we're saying that instead of the doctors that are going unemployed, let's focus on actually prioritising these UK doctors and those that have vastly contributed to the NHS, instead of aggressively recruiting from WHO red list countries, which are struggling to keep doctors of their own. And these are very simple, fixable problems. And that's why we want Mr. Streeting, instead of saying that he's prepared to go to war with doctors, to actually come and calm the rhetoric down and do a deal that gets patients the doctors they deserve to be seen by.
You have very, very legitimate long-term concerns. I guess my question to you as a leader representing your troops, as it were, in this regard, is whether your execution on advising your troops on when to strike is working or not. Because in the short term, after the budget, when the NHS and the Health Secretary has not been given any more money to use, when you have had a 30% pay rise over the last 3 years, a 5.4% pay rise already this year, when public opinion, I should say, in July was at around 34% opposing your strikes, is now above 50% opposing your strikes, and when you're striking just before Christmas, and the head of the NHS England, Sir Jim Mackey, says it's totally reckless behaviour of the BMA, do you look, as a leader of your organisation, advising your troops to strike and accept it is not working in the short term, even if you've got a very strong argument in the long term?
Well, these strikes are short-term. This is short-term action for long-term patient safety and sustainability. There's now disruption all year long. The winter crisis is now a perpetual crisis. What we saw as corridor care is now something that happens throughout the year. And this is unacceptable because we have unemployed doctors who can see patients, who can drive the waiting list down, who can deliver those GP appointments and reduce the waiting times in A&E. And instead of actually dealing with the issue, the government's kicking the can down the road to 2027 potentially, and not dealing with it now. And these are, again, simple solutions to fixable problems. And ultimately, we want to work together with the government to deliver for patients, because patients will ultimately benefit from focusing on retaining doctors, on UK doctors and those that have significantly contributed to the NHS being prioritised, and also sustainably increasing the number of jobs so that patients can be seen. Look, there is the money to pay doctors. We are focused now on privatisation, PFIs, and other wasteful expenditure. We can use that money, instead of it being used to substitute doctors with non-doctors, we can use that on doctors so that patients can be seen and we can drive the waiting list down together with the government.
Dr. Sharma, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you sharing your point of view.
So just wanted to bring you a few festive pictures since it is the 2nd of December. We're going to indulge ourselves because the White House...
We can do this every day. I'm up for it, by the way. Can't get enough Christmas in my house.
This is the White House, and they are...
Not my house.
Not Will's house.
No, alas.
They're going all out. Look at that. That's the First Lady, Melania Trump, unveiling this year's Christmas trees and decorations. So they've got 75 wreaths and 51 Christmas trees. 51 Christmas trees.
54 kilograms of gingerbread. That's the headline. Do you see that? Wow.
Imagine how big that house is going to be.
Do you think they just go around nibbling it in between meetings?
Yeah.
And 2,800 gold stars, 10,000 butterflies.
I mean, they've gone all out. They've gone all out at the White House.
Butterflies a Christmassy thing? I'm fully in support of it.
More of a summer animal, probably, I would imagine.
Have we got that right? Do we mean butterflies?
I don't know.
Either way, I love it.
We're here for
it. Yeah, lovely little bit of Christmas cheer there. Have we updated the Sky Christmas picture? I thought we got a Christmas tree up yet? Not here.
Not here. We're in Westminster, and there is no
delay,
Christmas
guys.
tree in Westminster yet.
There is an HQ.
Sky HQ, there is one. We've got a Christmas tree outside, though.
Yeah, I think we need to rectify this.
Just pop down to
buy one.
Go and get one. Let's do it.
I got a new Christmas jumper, actually. Maybe we'll sport that tomorrow. We shall see. We are going to talk, coming up, to two sisters leading groundbreaking research into extending how long humans can live. It's a really fascinating story. It's up next. Don't go there.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
So it feels to me like everyone is obsessed with trying to live longer, which I guess, makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of stories about the search for immortality that are kind of taking over, if you like, throughout history.
But two sisters are now making moves to turn superstitious ideas into scientific ones with groundbreaking research into cell renewal. They are Dr. Karina Kern and Serena Kern-Libera. They're the founders of Linkgevity, which is working on human trials looking into cell death. They join us now. Thank you very much for joining us. Very good morning to you both.
Good morning.
What, if I can just ask the simple question first of all, what is the science behind what you guys are doing?
Sure. So the science is very much how do you get to the heart of age-related disease? And when I talk about aging, what I'm really talking about is these devastating diseases, these debilitating diseases from cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that really rob us of our human dignity. And the question is always, how is it that medicine has been so phenomenal at tackling diseases you get early in life, like infectious disease, but it's been so tricky to take out age-related diseases? And very much our work is trying to unravel that complexity. appreciating the fact that unlike the diseases early in life where they're typically more simplistic, there's more single underlying driver.
And so what's
more complex.
What's it? Can you like take a pill? Can you what's the thing that you can do?
I think, well, Karina's focus has been on blocking necrosis, which is a systems level process. And really, when you block necrosis, what you're doing is shielding the body against various stresses. But that has huge implications from an aging perspective, because what happens, as we all know, when we get older, there's a downward spiral that takes place in health. And that's what we're really looking at targeting and stopping.
And how would you better do that then? Is it, do we know yet, or is it still?
So it is very much trying to get pharmaceuticals or drugs approved for aging. And the frightening thing is, to date, not a single drug has been approved for aging.
Serena, in terms of where we stand, I mean, is it something the government supports in this regard? Are they behind it? Have you engaged with them? Or are there kind of concerns that you're not there yet on the science?
I mean, so what we have is a drug already, which we discovered in record time. And again, you know, all credit to my sister there. She is brilliant. In terms of backing, we have received a number of grants from the government. There's a space angle to this because, of course, you undergo accelerated aging in space. So the UK Space Agency has supported us, so has NASA, actually. So this is exciting. It's really cutting edge. And, you know, I think we will see where we get to, but we're very hopeful.
And this is not like wellness. This is not like you need to get 14 hours sleep a night and, you know, do 40,000 steps a day. This is all about health, I guess.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think in many ways, the wellness sector has taken over the longevity sector. And I think we're trying to bring back, and that's where the name Linkgevity comes from. It's really linking longevity and medicine and bringing back the kind of hardcore science to the sector.
And not about looking younger as well, I should say as well.
It's not about living forever, at least for us. It's not about looking younger. I mean, this comes from a very personal experience for us where we both watched the downward spiral in health of our grandparents when they got to a certain age. And it's really to intervene in that and stop that systems level collapse.
Thanks both very much indeed. It's great to get that perspective and really interested to see where it all goes, you know, with the kind of funding and making more advances with the drug that you've discovered.
Yeah, Karina, Serena, thanks so much. Congratulations on the huge progress. We are going to take a quick break at the top of the hour here. And when we come back, we'll have all of the day's top stories, including ongoing, I guess, speculation onto exactly what the Health Secretary, the Justice Secretary will announce later today, but we'll dissect what he said to us earlier.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Hello, good morning. It is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots to get to.
The Justice Secretary tells us 2 prisoners who were mistakenly released since he promised to crack down on the issue last month are still on the run.
It comes as he plans a major overhaul of the Crown Courts, hoping to clear the backlog and hand more support to victims.
The boss of NHS England calls a new resident doctors' strike planned in the run-up to Christmas totally reckless behaviour.
We'll also be joined by a leading space scientist on how a $10 billion telescope is helping us travel through time.
Plus, Sky News joins Spanish police on a mission to intercept drug runners on a notorious route from Africa.
A very good morning to you and welcome to the programme. The Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy has told the programme a further 2 prisoners who have been accidentally released since he made a statement to MPs last month are still at large. Mr Lammy was actually on to talk about court reforms, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, he revealed the 2 people who've been mistakenly freed are still at large.
Well, I made a statement to Parliament a few weeks ago, and at that stage I reported, and that was unusual because usually the records are reported in July. 91 people had been released in error. At that stage there were 3 people at large who had been released in error. That figure has come down, and I'm pleased about that. But I've said that I'm not going to give a running commentary, Sophie, and the reason for that is we have a system. Data has to be properly validated. We also have a system where if someone is at large, the police are asked to do that.
Are you aware of any more violent offenders or sex offenders?
There have been releases in error since I made that statement, but I'd want to convey that the trend this year is fortunately downwards.
Can you give me a number on how many?
2.
There's been 2?
There have been 2.
And are they still at large, or have they been apprehended?
Sophie, it's important that I release that data in the way that it's always been released, and it's also important that I work with police where someone is at large, and sometimes, because the police are about to nab somebody, they actually don't want me to discuss it. And it's important that they get under.
But are those 2 people still at large or not? Are they?
There are 2 people currently at large.
David Lammy talking to us a little earlier. We have had a political response from Robert Jenrick. He hasn't hung about. He's tweeted to say in response to that, Calamity Lammy admits 2 more dangerous prisoners have been mistakenly released, but he won't say who they are or where they are. When will this fiasco end?
Mari's here to talk to us about this. I mean, Mari, let's start with what unfolded in that interview and this release of prisoners. A very sort of high-profile topic for the government, for David Lammy in particular. And I guess there's a sort of 2 sides to this. He was kind of wanting to be transparent, but it's a damaging thing to be transparent about.
Yeah, and that's partly why he was in a bit of a pickle a few weeks ago in the chamber when he wasn't completely transparent, when we already were aware, Sky News was aware anyway, that certain prisoners had been released and were at large. Then he was criticised of not being transparent and therefore is trying to make sure he's transparent this time around. And that's why he came clean to you, Sophie, and said 2 people are still at large. He's also been telling journalists this morning that 12 people have been released in error since that difficult, let's be polite, difficult common statement earlier in November. So in the space of 3-4 weeks, 12 people were accidentally released on his watch. And this is part of the problem. We know this is always a problem under the Conservatives as well. It's not a Labour problem. But nonetheless, he's arguing that while we still use a paper system rather than a digitised system, this leaves a lot more room for human error. Now, of course, there can always be error with computers. Let's not pretend computers are perfect. But his idea is that as we move away from that paper-based system, the hope would be that this would reduce.
Let's talk about the justice reforms, because these are actually really important as well. And if it wasn't for the other headline, we'd be kind of leading on this. Because it feels pretty clear, doesn't it, that there has been some kind of change of heart for whatever reason since last week, when the plan was to scrap jury trials in all but the most serious cases.
Yeah, so last week, ministers were sent a memo where they were briefed that jury trials were going to be scrapped apart from rape, murder and manslaughter. And now that is not the case. And there appears to be a rowback on this and a softening of these reforms. They were branded to be, these huge historical reforms. And there are still reforms coming today when David Lammy steps up in the chamber, but nowhere near on the scale that was originally briefed. So clearly, whether that be because of public opinion or perhaps cabinet opinion or perhaps both, you were talking to Lammy about this morning, weren't you, Sophie? Clearly there has been a change of heart somewhere in government and some of the plans have been watered down, let's say. But just to give viewers an exact explanation of what David Lammy is going to actually announce today. First of all, he is going to change the limit that magistrates can sentence. So at the moment, it's up to 12 months. He's going to make that 18 months, and in some cases, there'll be a provision for it to be 2 years. The next thing he's going to do, he's going to scrap the defendant's right to elect to be tried by jury in an either-way case. Either-way offences are when you can be tried by a magistrate or you can be tried in the Crown Court by a jury. The next thing he's going to do is going to create this bench division in the Crown Court. He was telling you about this, wasn't he, Sophie? And that is going to be led by one judge, not a jury. Now, this is interesting because in the Leveson recommendations said they should do this, but said it should be a judge and 3 magistrates. So it is different from that recommendation, which I find interesting. He's also going to allow juries to be available in Crown Court either-way offences if the sentences are likely to be 5 years or more. So very serious. And then finally, the appeals process. So if you want to appeal a magistrate's decision, that will no longer automatically go to the Crown Court. It will have to have sign-off from a judge before it goes to a Crown Court. That is what we're expecting. Those are the kind of headline changes that we're expecting today from David Lammy, not what was briefed last week.
No, thank you very much, Mari.
All right, great stuff. Now, resident doctors in England are set to go on strike again. The British Medical Association's announced a 5-day walkout from the 17th of December.
The boss of NHS England has described the move as totally reckless behaviour. We can bring in our correspondent Oliver Whitfield-Wistrich now. Oliver, just give us a bit of a snapshot. Where are we up to?
So the government says, look, over the past 3 years, junior doctors have had a pay rise of 28.9%. Many viewers will remember that they've seen picket lines outside their hospitals for the past stretching up to 2.5 years now. The government also says in the latest round of negotiations that it's had with the BMA, it's been offering more jobs. But the BMA says there's a lot of resident doctors who were previously called junior doctors who actually come into the jobs market and they're fighting for positions. There's quite a lot of them that are unemployed. They say that around a third of them haven't got any substantial work. And they say that actually the pay offer still isn't substantial enough. Now, we heard earlier on from Dr. Shivam Sharma. He's the Deputy Chair of the Resident Doctors Association within the BMA.
This is a dispute on both jobs and pay, and on jobs, he's not prepared to go fast enough. He said that he's looking at it being solved over a number of years. We need it to be solved now when patients are waiting longer than ever in corridors, waiting over 12 hours in A&E when, the waits used to be less than 4. And we're also turning away 13 doctors for every 1 A&E post. That is completely ludicrous. Currently, you need a PhD, written a chapter in a medical textbook, and multiple publications to even have a chance of getting an interview for medical training. That is ludicrous. And yes, there is a dispute on pay, and we're looking to do a deal over a number of years to restore that pay. And ultimately, we're going by Mr. Wistrich's own words, which is we want a journey to pay restoration. So these are very much fixable solutions. And even since the last strike, we wrote to the government and they didn't even bother writing back. We want to do a deal, so we urge the government to come forward and negotiate.
And Oliver, what's the head of the NHS been saying about this?
So they're saying that it's reckless at a time where we're leading into Christmas. You've got pressures that are already mounting on the NHS. We've seen some of the ambulance services saying that they're getting increased calls in recent days. There's more people in the community who've got respiratory problems, struggling with breathing, basically, because there's a number of flu bugs that are going around. There's quite a lot of bout of nasty cold. We've seen in the Southern Hemisphere how bad the flu has been this season. It's been described as once in a decade. And so the fear from health bosses, from the Department of Health and Social Care, Wes Streeting as well, is that You know, we're heading into a critical period where winter pressures always place additional burdens on the NHS. To then have a strike at the same time could really make things worse.
Oliver, thank you very much indeed. Now, we're also talking today about how safe women feel on the street, as a new study even shows that around half of women are going to avoid Christmas parties over fears of being unsafe.
Later today, part 2 of the Angelini inquiry will be published. It was initially set up after Sarah Everard was murdered by Met Police officer Wayne Couzens back in 2021.
So today's report is going to look at the measures that have been put in place since then to protect women from sexually motivated crimes in public. Our correspondent Katie Barnfield's been speaking to women in Liverpool about their experiences.
You wouldn't believe the amount of people who are drunk and go in for a kiss or a hug and stuff. It's so degrading, especially if you've got a crowd of people watching.
Busking in cities like Liverpool, musician Amy Alex gets so much unwanted behaviour, she started posting it on social media.
You put money in his thing doesn't mean I have to give you a hug. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Again, just got really close, started trying to touch me unconsensually.
What was that? You just wiped on me. That was wet.
When I watched it back, you can hear him say pee.
So he said, I've wiped pee on you.
Pee, and I was watching that back, editing it, my jaw just dropped and I was horrified. It's not right, and it used to upset me a hell of a lot more than it does now. When I was 21, 22, 23, when I started doing this, I used to go home in tears. It's unfortunately just a bit of a given if you're a woman doing this kind of work.
After Sarah Everard's murder, there was an outpouring of anger about women's safety on the streets. But 4 years on, how much has really changed?
So one of the things that we hand out to the women are safety alarms. But it's really handy to just kind of keep on your keys, on your person, and if you pull it out, it makes a really loud noise. One of our women, she will get 2 buses home because that is safer than her waiting in a dark bus stop.
These lunch clubs are a safe space for the members of Tomorrow's Women, a Wirral charity offering support for everything from domestic violence to harassment in public.
You often find with a sexual assault case, the first question can often be, what were you wearing? And it really doesn't matter what the woman was wearing.
Every woman knows this when they're walking home at night.
Yeah, it's a very normal thing for a lot of women.
Something a lot of women worry about, including me, is going out for a run alone in the evenings, especially when it's so dark like this in the winter. At Girls on the Go, they started a women's-only running club for exactly this reason, to get some safety in numbers.
Had a couple of incidents like catcalling, some people almost like trying to chase you.
The second you touch your toes or you go into a squat, whistles out of cars, horns being honked. Every single girl here will have some form of experience around sexual harassment.
One of the issues is it's not taken seriously by society and by police, and I think if it was, then more women would speak out about it and more could be done.
Well, today we're talking about women's safety. We're also talking, of course, about the justice system more widely, with the reforms that the government is announcing about, I guess, extending magistrates' decisions or potentially judges' decisions to some criminals that currently get a trial by jury. We obviously also had the admission from David Lammy that there are 2 people who were mistakenly released from prison and are still at large since he made the statement in November saying he was getting a grip of the issue. Well, we can talk now to the Shadow Chancellor at Mel Stride, who's here with us now. Thank you for being with us. First, I just want to get your reaction to the interview we had with David Lammy earlier. He was up front. He said, yeah, since I made the statement in November, we're still looking for 2 more people who were mistakenly released from prison.
Well, clearly one mistake is one too many. This has been something that's been going on for a considerable amount of time, but I think I'm right in saying that the numbers mistakenly released in the last year is higher than in the previous year. And I think it is a case of the government needs to get a grip on it. And I don't think we know much about the 2 that have been released and are still on the run and are yet to be apprehended. And I think David Lammy needs to tell us a bit more about that, potentially to Parliament, of course.
We've had a statement through from Robert Jemrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary. He kind of echoes really what you've said. You know, he's described him as Calamity Lammy. I guess he's gone a bit stronger than you probably, perhaps in his usual style. He said that he won't say who they are or where they are. But I mean, you know, this is is that fair? Like, under the Conservatives, we didn't get a running commentary naming people who were,
I think now that the public... Yeah, I do understand your point, but I think now that the public has been informed that there are 2 people at large who are yet to be apprehended, and in the past, actually, where we've had that situation, it has been the public, to a degree, that have been part of apprehending people who've been on the run. I think it is appropriate that he comes forward and tells us a bit more about who they are, what they were convicted for, how dangerous they might be, so that we're properly informed.
Shouldn't that be under the guidance of the police, though?
Well, I think it's clearly a matter for David Lammy to have discussions with the police and the prison service and others and come to those conclusions. But it seems to me on the face of it that if you've got 2 people out there who have been let go by mistake, and that is now out there in the public domain, and he has put it into the public domain this morning, then we should know a little bit more about it.
More widely, of course, we've got these justice reforms going through. It looks pretty clear that they've rode back on the initial decision, which would have been to restrict trials by juries for all but the most serious cases. It now looks like actually it's just going to be for what's known as either way cases, so cases that could be tried by a magistrate or by a jury. Do you think that that's a sensible compromise?
Well, as you say, Sophie, we don't yet know the full detail, but we will do presumably very shortly. I think the whole principle, though, of trial by jury is fundamental to justice in our country, and has been for a very long time. You can go right back to 1215 and Magna Carta to find that kind of element there. And I think to erode that on the basis that we need to get the backlog down is the wrong approach. Now, none of that is to say that it's not a very serious matter that people are having to wait years for justice in some cases for alleged very serious offences. But I think the approach is actually speeding up and working with the system, which will probably require additional resources. But when we've just had a budget in which £16 billion extra has been spent on expanding the welfare bill, spending more on benefits, I think those are the wrong choices. I think people should expect the government to be focusing on things like this rather than benefits.
Do you accept, because I know there's been a lot of talk about the Conservatives' inheritance, do you accept that when it comes to justice, you left a pretty difficult inheritance? You know that, don't you? You acknowledge that.
Look, we did have COVID, for example, which did put pressure on the entire system. We did also show when we were in office, actually, you could deal with backlogs more effectively. We had the riots.
It was a difficult inheritance. For whatever reason, whoever's to blame, but on justice in particular,
these numbers have been high for some considerable time. But I think we did show when we were in power, particularly in the 2010s, when we had the riots at the early stage of that coalition government, that we could set up a system that could process cases very quickly. And I think that's the kind of grip that we need to see now from the government.
Prisons were at breaking point, weren't they?
Well, we are at capacity, and one of the ways of dealing with that is we've got over 12,000 foreign offenders in prisons. They should be going back to the countries where they came from, and that's another area where the government could make a big difference if they grip the issue.
Ask you about the chair of the Office of Budget Responsibility, who has resigned. Was that the right decision?
Well, that's a matter, obviously, for Richard Hughes, who is, I think, a very honourable man and a man of great integrity. And I had dealings with him when I was chair of the Treasury Select Committee for some years. And I think that's a decision that he has clearly taken. One has to suspect at the back of all this that the government is not displeased by the fact that he's gone, because I think it becomes a distraction from the other big issue that's on the table, which is the issue of the Chancellor at that press conference and to the press more broadly in early November, having misrepresented the public finances, having known, as we didn't know at the time, what the OBR was saying in that forecast at the end of October.
So it was better. It was better. Was about the economy, the state of the economy.
Yeah. Well, look, we know from what
Do you give her a bit of credit for that?
Well,
it's improved. Better than you thought.
No, I don't, because if you look at the forecast from the OBR, actually they're showing that from next year on, growth is down, inflation is high.
It just seems. Well, in that case, then, isn't it right then that she? This is genuinely. Can I just because this is genuinely what I'm struggling to get my head around.
Yeah.
Right? You seem to be trying to have your cake and eat it. You seem to be saying that actually the economy is in a much better situation, so she didn't have to do all these terrible things. But then you're also saying, on the other hand, well, actually, no, it is still really bad, the state of the economy. Which is it?
So, look, what I'm talking about when it comes to the Chancellor is on the 4th of November, at a press conference that she convened, she misrepresented the state of the public finances. She suggested there was a huge black hole when in fact there wasn't. She didn't present the whole picture. And we know that because Richard Hughes put into the public domain subsequently, in fact last Friday, the details of what she knew at the end of October. And that is a misrepresentation of information that should have been kept confidential anyway, because those iterations between the OBR and the Treasury should be confidential. And I think that's a serious matter. That's why I have written to the Financial Conduct Authority to ask for an investigation into that.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
Nice pride speaking to us there. Coming up, we're going to be talking Hillsborough. We'll talk to Elkin Abrahamson, who represented 20 families during those Hillsborough inquests. That's coming up next.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
Welcome back. The largest ever independent investigation into alleged police misconduct and criminality in England and Wales will be published today. The report will examine the actions of police before, during and after the Hillsborough Stadium disaster of 1989. It remains one of the most tragic events in British sporting history, leading to the deaths of 97 Liverpool fans. Let's bring in Elkin Abrahamson, who's the director of Jackson Lease Law Firm and represented 20 families during the Hillsborough inquest. Thanks so much for joining us, Elkin. If we could just step back to start off, because this is obviously something that we've touched on and covered many times. What's the significance of today's report relative to those that have come before it?
I have to say very little. I mean, we've had a thorough round of inquests which have uncovered the truth about Hillsborough and made that public and created a permanent record. The IOPC report it's a little bit Alice in Wonderland. It's about what the IOPC would have done had this report being issued over 30 years ago and what they don't have the power to do now. So it's a bit ineffectual. Having said that, there may be some additional findings which may be of some help to some families.
What sort of areas will you be looking out for in that regard?
Well, what I'm hoping actually is a slightly more general point, which is that the IOPC confirms that it needs the protection of the Hillsborough law, which is what we're proposing and what is going through Parliament now, in order to give them the power to insist that officers provide both candour and assistance to their inquiries.
And are you expecting there to be actions off the back of that? Or as you said before, the power's not around to change things that would have been needed from not just years ago, but decades ago?
So Hillsborough law, as it's currently drafted, requires that when there are inquiries and investigations, people taking part in those have a duty of candour and assistance, and that's a positive duty to come forward with facts which might be relevant. Unfortunately, the government hasn't yet confirmed that the IOPC is one of those investigations where that statutory duty will apply. So I'd like to see the IOPC support that, and I'd like to see the government respond to that.
As we said in the intro, you've represented some 20 families that were affected by the Hillsborough disaster over the years. What are they wanting from, whether it's this or what's still to come, and what are they genuinely hopeful for versus being, I guess, disappointed so many times?
Well, as with so many families who were bereaved as a result of state disasters and subsequent cover-ups, what they want is to ensure it doesn't happen again. And the hope is that the law that we're trying to get passed and is going through Parliament at the moment will create duties of candour and create duties to constructively assist with inquiries to make sure that once a disaster has happened, at least the investigation finds out the truth quickly to ensure that that type of disaster doesn't happen again.
Elkan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Elkan Abrahamson, Director of Jackson Lease Law Firm. So to come, we'll be speaking to the broadcaster Mark Mardell about how he was refused the chance to board for a flight due to his Parkinson's.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was the president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're back. Let's have a look at the news this morning, shall we? The Justice Secretary tells a programme that a further 2 prisoners who have been accidentally released from prison are still at large.
He's also expected to announce a number of sweeping reforms to the justice system in the Commons later, including extending the sentencing limit for magistrates' courts to 18 months.
US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to arrive in Moscow this morning to meet with President Putin as Russia claims it's captured another city in the Donetsk region of Ukraine. Now, a former BBC journalist has said he was humiliated after being turned away from his flight by Turkish Airways due to having Parkinson's disease and no letter from a doctor.
The broadcaster was unaware of the requirement and was left stranded until he booked a flight with a different airline the next day from Istanbul to Gatwick. We can speak to Mark Mardell now. A real pleasure to have you with us, Mark. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm kind of completely shocked by this, that this was even possible to unfold. What were the requirements for you before boarding the plane that I guess many people would be unaware would have been needed?
Well, I was totally unaware. I mean, I went there with my son, who had to take an earlier flight, so he couldn't be with me the whole time. But I mean, because have got Parkinson's, I want to sit down and my voice is rather weaker than it used to be. So I said to him, can you ask for assisted boarding? Because we've been on a road trip and we hadn't had time to book it normally. And sorry, I just had to turn my phone off. So he went up there and said, my dad's got Parkinson's, can he have assisted boarding? And they said, you need a letter from the doctor. We thought that meant to prove that I had Parkinson's, which seemed a bit weird. But they said, no, you can't travel if you've got Parkinson's. And it turned out that that's the only thing that they ever said. I mean, the only requirement for anybody, or apart from if you're on a stretcher, you also need a doctor's letter, which isn't unreasonable, I suppose. But I mean, Parkinson's is the only thing they singled out. We already feel on the podcast that I do with various other broadcasters, movers and shakers, that it's a bit of a Cinderella condition, a bit sort of misunderstood, and this seemed to really confirm it.
Yeah, you talked there about how it's misunderstood. I mean, I'll be honest, the whole thing sounds completely extraordinary. But can you just talk a little bit more about that? Like, why do you think, what kind of misunderstanding of Parkinson's do you think has led to this wild situation?
I really don't know. I mean, I guess there are some countries in the world, I wouldn't have thought Turkey was one of them, but where they think it's the responsibility of witchcraft, causes Parkinson's. I've read that in Turkey, it's particularly perceived as people with younger people, which doesn't apply to me, but it's seen as odd that they behave like that and that people think they're drunk or whatever. So I just don't know why Parkinson's. I mean, because, you could understand, I wouldn't prove it, I think it would be discriminatory and terrible, but if they included, I don't know, multiple sclerosis or other neurological conditions, you could see that logic. But I mean, just to single out Parkinson's is dreadful. And then this woman came up and said, because we tried to sort of say, maybe it's not Parkinson's, maybe it's my foot or something, said, you can see it's Parkinson's because your hands are shaking. Well, my hands don't shake, actually. Although maybe they were then because I was so angry and upset. But she said, it's for your own good. And then left me to wander around the airport for 7 hours on my own trying to find the bag. Just dreadful.
So sorry.
Have you ever experienced anything like this in other walks of life, different airlines or other
No, nothing like that. Because I mean, I've had Parkinson's for 3 years, and I've been travelling using assisted boarding for a year or so, and every other airline has been fantastic. In fact, ironically, I was about to sit down and thought I've got a nice amount of time to write a little article on how wonderful assisted boarding is, because you manage to get to the front of the passport queue, the front of the security and all that sort of stuff very easily. No trouble at all with anybody else. And now it appears we may be winning the battle. We certainly haven't won it because they've dropped the requirement on their English UK site for people with Parkinson's to have a medical note from their doctor. But they haven't dropped it from the other American sites. They haven't dropped it from French or German or Italian. And it's still not clear whether they've told any of their staff about the change, because they haven't told me directly.
Kind of extraordinary that it remains in place for other particular destinations.
It is. Can I ask, so, you're there, you're trying to board a flight, you're with your son, you're in quite a positive state of mind, and then this happens. How did it make you feel?
Really dreadful, because, I mean, Parkinson's is a daily struggle, but we try not to let it affect the way we live as much as possible. But, you can't even get your shirt on your own or trousers on properly. And, it is a humiliation, I suppose, but you try and cover that up and not behave like that. And then even asking for assisted boarding. I mean, admitting for me, I know this may sound weird to people who've been disabled all their lives, but it was quite humiliating, quite difficult to admit. It does lower you in the estimation of some people, even your family or kids or whatever, don't like to think of dad as disabled. So it's difficult to admit. And then just to be left alone like that and just, I felt so humiliated. I said, I think I was quite stoic because I only nearly burst into tears about 5 times. And I was helped by a wonderful passenger, another Turkish-American woman, who saw that I was staggering around looking for this wretched place where my bags were meant to be for ages. And she just sort of came over and helped me find it, helped me talk to the people. But even then it was ages afterwards. But it does make you feel so humiliated. I haven't felt like that for, since I've had the disease.
Well, Mark, in particular, therefore, we thank you for sharing your story and for joining us this morning.
Yeah, you're a legend to us, and it sounds like you're a bit of a legend for people with Parkinson's as well, for raising the awareness and also getting some change, hopefully. I hope they're listening to this interview.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Mark Mardell there. Now, Sky News has been given rare access to an elite unit of Spanish police officers working around the clock to try and stop drugs getting into Europe.
Andalusia has long been used as a hub for drugs gangs to get cocaine into the continent, and authorities are now using all the tools they can to try and stop them in their tracks. The smugglers, though, have got the upper hand when it comes to resources.
Our Europe correspondent Alistair Bunkle joined the force on one of their latest missions to hunt down criminals at sea under the cover of night. Here's a taste of his report.
It's midnight and we're at sea hunting for drug smugglers with an elite unit from the Spanish police. The narco boat has come from North Africa. They're trying to reach Spain, one of the main gateways into Europe. In the seat behind us, an officer is tracking the smugglers through an infrared camera. We're moving fast, off the Strait of Gibraltar, a busy stretch of water only 8 miles across at its narrowest. It is a race, and the odds are against us. So we're going 43 knots, they're going 50 knots, and this is the chase. And the smugglers will know exactly where they are. They'll know where Spanish waters end and Moroccan waters start, and they will go back into Moroccan waters. And at that point, there's nothing that the Spanish police can do. The police unit works in the dark. It is almost pitch black on board. This is the most dangerous moment as the 2 boats close in at speed. We're just about to see for ourselves the risks they take every single night. In the dark, we've crashed into a series of massive waves made deliberately by the narco boat to evade the police. It's worked. We watch them escape.
We hit some enormous waves. I'm guessing the wake
of the boat that we were chasing. It sort of threw this thing all over the place and threw everything up in the air, so they've had to sort of call it off for now. The smugglers are becoming increasingly bold. They will do anything to avoid being caught. The Spanish police are armed. Shootouts at sea do happen.
Usually they run away. Yeah. Usually, but not always. Yeah. Sometimes they try to hit us. As he say, we must to respond.
How do you respond?
Our guns.
Yeah. Earlier this month, police intercepted a narco sub off the coast of Portugal. The cramped vessel had crossed the Atlantic with 1.7 tons of cocaine, a potential street value of well over £100 million. The journey can take up to a month. They surface out to sea and transfer their drugs cargo to the smaller rapid speedboats for the final bit of the journey into shore. Last year, almost 30,000 people were arrested in connection with drug smuggling in Spain. Once the cocaine is on land, it can be on the streets of the UK and other European cities within 24 hours. Through an intermediary, we've been sent a location to meet a cocaine smuggler on the Atlantic coast. He says he is the head of the biggest smuggling cartel in Spain. He only agrees to speak to us if we change his voice and don't show his face. It is not just the police he is worried about. If his gang know that he has met us, his life is at risk.
We are very busy at the moment. There's a lot of work. Latin American narcos are crazy for this area.
And where is most of it coming from originally?
The cocaine comes from South America, crosses Africa, and reaches here.
And it goes to where? It stays in Spain or it goes across Europe?
Cocaine from here goes everywhere in Europe. That's the point.
A few weeks ago, 5 police officers were shot and wounded during a drugs raid on a warehouse not far from where we met the smuggling boss. Spain's police union has said that the country has lost control and that the area is being colonized by traffickers. How often are you bringing cocaine and hashish in? Is this every day, every night, or a couple of times a week? How often is it?
Our smugglers work every night, of course. There are in shifts. Even as I'm currently speaking with you, there are narco boats full of trucks going in that sea. This is how it works.
There are so many smugglers in this part of Spain that the police call them the mice. It is a non-stop war on drugs against gangs that are richer, bigger, and better equipped than even the police themselves. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Andalusia, southern Spain.
Now, it was a big night at the Royal Albert Hall last night with stars on the red carpet for the British Fashion Awards.
Some of the celebs there was Kate Blanchett. We also saw Lily Allen and Mick Jagger as well, just a few of the many A-listers who were celebrating the very best in the world of fashion. That's Lily Allen there.
And actress Sienna Miller and singer Ellie Goulding were there, also walking the red carpet.
That's the fashion awards that were held last night. Mick Jagger and Ellie Goulding.
Now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a new poll that reveals what people think about the budget since it's come out, 6 days ago. We'll be right back.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Traveling is not just about the destination. It's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Hello again. Now, we've spent the last almost week digesting the budget, trying to get to grips with what it all means for our finances. So, look, it's a pretty good time to take a beat and try and work out how it's all gone down with the public.
Well, a new poll by YouGov and Sky News shows that when it comes to the economy, people's trust in the government is even lower than when Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
Our Deputy Political Editor has been crunching through all the numbers.
The budget fallout continues. The question everyone's been asking of Rachel Reeves, can you trust me? Well, now we've got the answer with the help of YouGov. And here's the question we've been asking for the last couple of days. Did the Chancellor exaggerate the bad economic news in order to put up taxes? Here's the public verdict. 37% thought she presented an overly negative view of the economy in the run-up to the budget. That's almost twice the percentage that thought she was broadly honest. 13% thought she was overly positive. We always exclude the don't knows, but that's not the backdrop to the budget that she would want to see. So let's look at the individual tax and spend measures last week and how they have gone down now the dust has settled a little bit. Now, the green is people who agree with measures. The red is those who don't. And you can see from the main spending measures, actually the public pretty much like them. Fuel duty freeze, business rate cuts, energy bill cuts. But arguably the totemic measure in the budget is this one, the two-child benefit cap, 58% don't like it. Now let's look at the tax measures, and some, like gambling tax, well, that's pretty popular. But the massive measures in the budget are really quite unpopular. Freezing income tax threshold, the electric vehicle tax, and changes to pensions for people in work. You can see all that red there, not happy at all. So where has this left Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and its economic reputation? Well, you can see here, this red line is people that think that Labour are the best placed party to manage the economy. And you can see after Keir Starmer became Labour, broadly speaking, did a good job. It became the top party. It overtook the Conservatives in late 2022. But here's the thing. Look at this line here. That's when Labour was elected. And look at the sharp drop almost immediately. And here, this is the latest data point. Let me just come around. It's actually dropped lower here than at any point since either Jeremy Corbyn was leader or lower than the Tories had when Liz Truss did her mini budget. Again, fairly disastrous here on 10%. Now, let's look at some other budget measures. Here we go. This is the proportion of people that think this budget will make the country better off. That's just 8%, 29%. Not much difference, but a whopping 52% think that this budget will make the country worse off. And then there's the question of trust. Do people think it breaches the manifesto? 57% think that it does, compared to just 13% that it doesn't. None of these results from YouGov are the kind of things that Rachel Reeves wants to see as she's trying to reset the public finance and restore the public's trust in her as Chancellor.
Sam Coates there looking through all of those charts and numbers. Now, all morning we've also been talking about women's safety, you know, when you're out on the streets, whether after dark, out running or whatever it is. And there is a really significant report that is going to be released at lunchtime today about this.
It's called the Angelini Inquiry. It's been set up, it was initially set up after Sarah Everard was murdered by Met police officer Wayne Couzens back in 2021.
So it's going to look at things that have been put in place since then to try and protect women from sexually motivated crimes in public. Our correspondent Molly Malone, who is following the story, sent us this.
We expect around lunchtime to mark the beginning of phase 2 of this independent inquiry, which was commissioned back in 2021 after the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Couzens. Now, if that phase 1 was really looked at the specifics of that case, the missed opportunities, the red flags that the inquiry believes should have been noted about Wayne Couzens as he made his way and his career through the police service, this is supposed to be much more about society, about the measures or perhaps lack of measures that this inquiry feels are in place to protect women in public spaces, particularly protecting women, preventing sexually motivated crimes. We know that the initial stage was very much focused on the specifics of Wayne Couzens. People will remember he staged a fake arrest in 2021 of Sarah when she'd been walking home on the night of the 3rd of March in 2021. It found that there were various missed opportunities by various different police forces. It said, the inquiry, that Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer and that various authorities missed opportunities to not let him progress through various different police forces. But as we know, the case of Sarah Everard really lit a touch paper in our society. It sparked months of protests, of outrage, and really people, women, sharing their own stories about not feeling safe in society. And you only need to look at polling, you only need to speak to your friends about the issues that they find and continue to find day in, day out, whether that be taking public transport, whether that be walking home at night. So it's those types of issues that Lady Angelini will look to tease out in this report, with the final report expected next year, looking much more at the police procedures again in terms of vetting and in terms of recruitment.
Molly Malone there for us. Now, wanted to bring you this quite extraordinary story that relates to a key train link into London that was going to be taken out of service for passengers. It was planning to ban passengers from a train service from Manchester to London at rush hour, no less, and it was going to be still travelling from Manchester to London, but only with staff on it.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that a train would be useful to have some passengers on that train. You know, that would, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but so this is the 7 a.m. train linking Manchester to London, and it's kind of like, the idea was it was a ghost train. So they initially announced, as the Office of Rail and Road, that Avanti West Coast would be blocked from carrying anyone apart from staff on the 7 a.m. service. Apparently it was because they wanted to try and, make sure that they didn't have a negative impact on reliability and punctuality of services on the West Coast main line. They've realised it's a completely crazy idea, and now it's all been changed.
So this kind of came out yesterday and everyone's like, what? You're going to send the train from Manchester to London at 7 a.m, but with no passengers? You might as well just let passengers get on it.
Yeah.
And do you know what's interesting? They're saying basically when passengers are involved, we can't keep it on time. It's essentially what is the kind of hint there of all of this. But anyway, they've U-turned on it. And I think to make the most of a train with no doubt hundreds of seats, if it is going to be a few minutes late, it's probably still worth making the most of
I like this.
seats.
I particularly like this. This is Avanti West Coast. They're really happy. They say the original decision would have had a detrimental impact on customers who use this train. Yeah, it would have had a detrimental impact because they wouldn't have been allowed to get on it. You don't say.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But anyway, a U-turn, at least, sense was seen. And,
it's true. Good news.
It wasn't the consequence after all. We are out of time on the show, but there's lots more to come on Sky News today throughout the day.
Yeah, an awful lot of stuff still to come, of course. David Lammy will be announcing those justice reforms, of course, around lunchtime today. We've got the Angelini report out as well. We'll be back 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, so hope to see you then.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.